Chapter 1631. Apart from the military band and children, there were also a group of policemen in police uniforms. They were here to maintain law and order. After all, there were close to 15,000 members of the South Ming Observer Group, and their safety had to be guaranteed. Because of this, one of the elders, Chief Police Long Tai Nan, had also come. 3 of the 5 elders had come, which was enough to show how much importance Yang Xie placed on the South Ming Observer Group. Apart from the policemen, there were some officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as some commoners who had come to watch. It was not entirely accurate to say that they were commoners. Most of them were representatives chosen by their respective units to welcome the guests. They were all dressed in neat and tidy clothes, and their figures were tall and straight. The men were mostly handsome, and the women were mostly beautiful. Every single one of them was full of energy, displaying the demeanor of the Han people of Crimson City. Apart from these Han people, there was also a welcoming group of 500 people. Among them, there were white-skinned, black-skinned, yellow-haired, red-haired, and blue-eyed people. They were all people who had been conquered by Yang Xie, and they were the ones who had performed well. Placing them here was a testament to the strength of the Yang faction and the nobility of the Han people. The welcoming group had more people than the observer group, and there were close to 20,000 of them. But even so, the plaza in front of Crimson City's new pier still didn't seem crowded. Just last year, the docks had undergone another expansion. Not to mention that there were only 30 to 40,000 people. Even if there were 100,000 people here, it would not be a problem. Everything on the pier had been seen clearly by the observer group. Seeing this scene, as a member of the observer group, they were naturally filled with pride. After all, no matter who went to a foreign place, they would want to be welcomed and not rolled their eyes. However, there were some people, mainly the South Ming officials, who maintained a smile on their faces, but their hearts were beating like drums. Why were the people welcoming them so energetic? Could these people really be ordinary people, and not the nobles and gentry in the city? Thinking about the state of the South Ming people, they were not starving. Although they wouldn't starve to death, most of them were emaciated and their eyes were lifeless. They were like walking corpses. How could they be as energetic as the people who greeted them? Could it be a disguise? At this moment, there were clearly many people who had such thoughts. The officials all decided to wait until they entered Crimson City to take a good look. Whether it was real or fake, they would be able to tell. The ship finally reached the shore, and the people who walked out from the first ship were the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Personnel, Chun Sun, and the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. The fact that they were able to join the observer group was their own idea, as well as the idea of the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen. One of them was in charge of the officials, while the other was in charge of the country's finances. This time, they came with the attitude of learning. He wanted to see how Yang Xie managed to accumulate so much money and food, and how he used his men. Speaking of which, both Yu Qian and Xin Yu knew these two, especially since Yu Qian's position in the past was basically the same as theirs. When this old friend met, he naturally went up to greet him with a smile. Seeing Yu Qian and Xin Yu walk over, whether it was Chen Sun or Wang Zhua, their expressions were somewhat unnatural. In the past, they all belonged to the Great Ming dynasty, but now, they all had their own masters. More importantly, Yu Qian and Shan Yu were clearly doing better. When they were on the ship, Yang Xie's people told them about the general situation in Crimson City, and they mentioned the words of the 5th cabinet elder. Thinking about it, he was already a cabinet elder, but they were still only ministers. In addition, the Southern Ming dynasty was currently in a precarious situation, while Yang Xie was at the peak of his power. The gap between the two sides would only be even greater, especially that Xin Yu. In the past, he was simply a nobody in their eyes, a low-ranking official. But now, he had become one of the Yang Xie's cabinet elders, and he held the power of life and death in his hands. If one studied the huge territory of Yang Xie, they would know that their real power was even greater than the king of a small country. Comparing oneself to others was indeed infuriating. Welcome, welcome. Yu Qian and Shen Yu smiled and extended their right hands to Chen Sun and Wang Zhua. They were in other people's territory, and this time, they were here to learn from them. The two ministers did not dare to be careless. They also quickly extended their right hands, and then the 4 of them shook hands. The etiquette of shaking hands was not in the Great Ming Dynasty, but at this moment, everyone followed suit without any feeling of disharmony. It was no wonder that this etiquette was accepted by the people in the future. After Ah Sun and Wang Zhua, the Minister of Right Xie Chong, the Minister of Justice Xiao Chua, the Minister of Works Wei Luo, the Minister of War Kuang Yi, and the Imperial Censor Shang Lu all came down from the other ships. Both sides greeted each other and greeted each other. What a big lineup. After the Minister of War Kuang Yi got down from the ship, his expression was somewhat ugly. In his view, this was clearly Yang Xie's show of strength. Bringing so many people. If this was not a show of force, what was it? Kuang Yi was a veteran, and because he was in charge of the Ministry of War, his temper was naturally worse than the average person's. Now that the Southern Ming dynasty was about to clash with Yang Xie, one could imagine how much pressure he was under. His reaction was within everyone's expectations. Yu Qian and Shun Yu looked at each other and did not pursue the matter. Instead, they chuckled. Then they said, "This is our king's wish. Whether you are willing or not, you have to abide by our rules. If not, please go back. The ship is right there, ready to leave at any time." Kuang Yi choked and wanted to turn around and leave. However, when he thought of his mission, he forced himself to endure it. He let out a cold snort and did not say anything else. The other ministers smiled awkwardly. They were not as unreasonable as Kuang Yi, so naturally, they would not stand with him, nor would they turn around and leave. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Qian smiled and said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's follow the arrangements. Come, bring out the flowers." As soon as his voice fell, the primary school students who had been standing there for a while came forward with garlands in their hands. When they arrived in front of the officials, they tiptoed and put the garlands in their hands around the necks of the officials. Adults were always the most tolerant towards children, not to mention such cute primary school students. They did not want anything but to give the wreaths. Therefore, this segment was completed very smoothly. After that, a row of prepared trams drove to the plaza in front of the pier. The members of the observation group entered the trams in batches. When they entered the trams, the members of the observation group all had curious expressions on their faces. Even Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, and the other high-ranking officials were no exception. Clearly, they were very curious about the things in front of them. Rows of clean seats were placed in front of them. When they sat down, they felt the softness of the sponge. Then, a clear glass appeared in front of them, allowing them to see everything from the inside out. When the members of the observation group entered the trams one by one, the first tram started and slowly drove out of the plaza, heading straight to Qiqian City. At this moment, screams of surprise rose and fell one after another. Whether it was the people sitting in the first tram or the people in the other trams, when they saw that the trams that were not pulled by horses or pushed by people began to slowly move on the main road, they all screamed in surprise. People always had a fear of the unknown, especially when the appearance of an object exceeded people's imagination. That feeling of fear would be even more intense. The members of the observation group screamed in surprise. No matter what rank the officials were, they all screamed inaudibly at this moment. They might be excited, surprised, or afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Fortunately, in each tram, in addition to the necessary driver, there was also a young and beautiful female soldier in Yang Xie. She wore a military uniform and looked valiant and formidable. Their voices sounded in a timely manner and began to explain the principles of the trams, explaining why the trams could move on their own. Although no one could really understand the principles that these female soldiers explained, at least everyone knew that this was not the result of magic. Everything was the result of scientific progress. Finally, some of the commotion was suppressed, and the members began to curiously observe the things inside and outside the trams. Wang's family of 4 was also in a tram that was starting to move. The tram moved slowly on the main road, and as it got closer to Qiqian City, the number of tall buildings in the surroundings began to increase. What a beautiful city! It's even more beautiful than our capital. It's clean and the air is so good. Sitting in the row behind them, granddaughter Wang Shang said excitedly, "That's right, it's really beautiful here." His wife, Wang Songshi, also sighed on the side. Her eyes were constantly changing with the surrounding scenery. The eldest grandson, Wang Zhiqing, who had always been calm, also pointed outside and shouted inaudibly, "Look, what's that? It's so fast, one person can fly away." Needless to say, Wang Zhiqing must have seen the bicycle on the bicycle path beside the tram. Although things like this were not widespread in the entire Qiqian city, at least some people could already afford it. Therefore, there was now an army of bicycles on the main road. This thing can even pull a person. That's amazing. Big brother, buy one too and pull me along. Okay? Wang Shang was clearly shocked. Then, her face filled with joy as she pulled Wang Zhiqing's arm with a pleading look. All right, if we can buy it, we will definitely buy one. Wang Zhiqing also made a solemn vow. Chapter 1632. Big Brother is the best. After receiving his promise, Wang Shang's beautiful eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. When Minister Wang Zhua heard all of this, his heart was filled with complex emotions. He had only just entered Crimson City, but it had already brought him too many surprises and unknowns. At this moment, he didn't know if this was a good or bad thing, but after seeing his grandson and granddaughter's performance, he had a faint feeling that Crimson City was too powerful and too rich. It was precisely because of this wealth and power that he had an indescribable curiosity and attraction to young people. He really didn't know if this curiosity was a good thing or a bad thing. However, he couldn't stop this at all. In fact, it wasn't just Wang Zhua who had such thoughts. Many of the Southern Ming officials in the observation group also had the same attitude. Among them, the shallow ones only saw the shock brought by the things in front of them, while the far-sighted ones saw the changes in the people around them and began to think deeply. Minister of War Kuang Yi was also sitting in a carriage. What was different was that the people around him weren't family members, but rather 3 young generals in the Southern Ming army. One of them was a chiliarch, while the other 2 were centurions. From this point alone, it could be seen that Kuang Yi was definitely a good official who wholeheartedly served the court. Previously, Kuang Yi had a lot of dealings with Yang Qindong, and he had always fully supported Yang Qindong. That was because at that time, Yang Xie hadn't said anything. Yang Qindong's actions were also to help the Southern Ming people quell the uprising. It was precisely because of this opportunity that Yang Qindong walked out of Baiming, defeated the Southern Ming, and openly went to Crimson City to obtain everything he had now. However, no matter how powerful Yang Xie was, in Kuang Ye's eyes, Yang Qindong was still a subject of the Great Ming. Whenever the Great Ming needed him, he should be called upon. However, all of this was just a matter of course. Why should everything he worked so hard for be unconditionally handed over to the court? If the imperial court was a court that truly cared about the people, perhaps Yang Qindong would really consider it. However, the current Southern Ming dynasty was filled with officials who were greedy and greedy. In the eyes of most people, there was only a small plot of land in front of them. How many people truly cared about the livelihood of the common people? Moreover, history has already told us that the Han people studied the path of the Golden Mean. In history, other than the Han dynasty, there were very few examples of expansion. In the few wars with foreign countries, they only won and then returned. There was no thought of going out at all. In this way, it would be fine if they didn't encounter a powerful enemy, but if they did, what would happen to the common people? In later generations, there was often a saying that the first class was a foreigner, the second class was a government official, the third class was a minor citizen, and the fourth class was a Han. At that time, Yang Qindong was weak and could only watch. But now that he had this kind of ability, he had to make changes. He had to conquer more territory for the Han people and let the Han people become the people at the top of the pyramid in this world. Kuang Yi naturally didn't know what Yang Qindong was thinking. Even if he knew, he probably wouldn't agree. This wasn't surprising. In the eyes of most of the great Ming officials, other than the Ming dynasty, the rest of the world was uncivilized. What was the use of occupying uncivilized people? Moreover, it would waste a lot of money. Kuang Yi couldn't imagine that war was also the best way to plunder money. As long as it was done well and the war was won, the dividends would be very generous. Unfortunately, the Ming people didn't know this. They only saw the wealth used to mobilize the army and didn't see the spoils after the war was won. Therefore, at this moment, Kuang Yi and Yang Qindong's ideas had undergone a serious change. Especially when Kuang Yi saw that Yang Xie, wanted to make a move on the southern Ming dynasty. Under the heavy pressure, the friendship between the two of them was completely lost. This was also why Kuang Yi didn't have a good expression when he got off the ship. This time, following the observation group to Crimson City was also Kuang Ye's last effort. He wanted to talk to Yang Chundong about the southern Ming dynasty. Although it was unlikely that there would be any good results, Kuang Yi was still willing to give it a try. Sir, this Crimson City is different from our southern Ming dynasty's cities. The only chiliarch accompanying them, Ku Hong, said carefully. How could the black-faced Kuang Yi not see it? However, at this moment, he didn't know what to say. He could only remind him again, look more and speak less. Especially the army camp in the city. You must go in and take a look. Yes, but Ku Hong's face revealed a trace of difficulty. This wasn't the southern Ming dynasty. Their identities as military officials were useless. If it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's permission, trespassing into the army camp would be a capital offense. Knowing what Ku Hong was worried about, Kuang Yi waved his hand and said, No matter, I will talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon about this matter. I will fight for you. The moment he said that, it was clear that Kuang Yi didn't have much confidence in this matter. Speaking of which, he was the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, the Minister of War, a lower-class rank 1 official, which was already quite impressive. However, if Yang Chundong didn't care about him, there was nothing he could do. Hearing Kuang Ye's words, Ku Hong and the other two didn't say anything else. Instead, they looked out of the window with curious gazes. The scenery constantly changed. The carriage entered the city and finally stopped in front of the Yangxia Hotel. Speaking of the Yangxia Hotel, it was built 3 years ago. Because the Yang family's territory and influence had expanded greatly, the Yang Family Grand Hotel was built on the largest scale when it was first built. It took up a few hundred hectares of land, and many of the surrounding buildings were demolished. After 3 years, it was finally completed. It was opened last month. The entire hotel was 8 stories high, and there were more than 20,000 bedrooms. There were also countless restaurants and boutiques. With such a large scale, it was more than enough to accommodate the southern Ming dynasty's observation team. Thus, when everyone walked out of the carriage, the room keys were handed to them. A thick red carpet was laid out from the entrance of the hotel all the way to the hotel. As soon as they entered the hotel, the various chandeliers above their heads were reflected in everyone's eyes. At this time, although the sky wasn't dark yet, the light from the electric lights was already useful. When they saw the colorful lights flickering above the chandeliers, almost everyone in the observation team was shocked again. Not only that, when everyone entered the elevator in the lobby and was suddenly brought up, many people were so scared that their faces turned pale. Then, they each took their own keys and entered the floor. After entering the room, everything in front of them opened their eyes. There was a separate luxurious bathroom, a comfortable big bed, and a wide and bright floor-to-ceiling window. There was also a kettle that could boil hot water when it was turned on, as well as instant noodles, ham sausages, canned food of various flavors, and various drinks placed in every room. It was so bright that it blinded most people's eyes. Wang Shang was a girl who was very curious about anything new. When she read the instructions in the room and learned how to use the things, she immediately boiled a kettle of water. Then, she poured the instant noodles and ham sausages into it and quickly ate until she was full. Touching her full stomach, she quickly walked out of the room and went to the next room. Then, she knocked on the door of each room. Soon, under her efforts, most of the instant noodles, ham sausages, and other things in the rooms were wiped out. The kind of junk food that everyone was used to in the future had now become incomparably delicious in the eyes of many people. As a direct result, when it was time for dinner, everyone came out of their rooms and entered the banquet hall in batches. When they saw the dazzling array of delicacies, many of them cast resentful gazes at Wang Shang. Wang Shang also felt very wronged. How would she know that Yang Xie had prepared so much delicious food for them at night? She thought that the so-called welcome banquet would be the same as the banquets held in the palace in the past. There would only be a small amount of food at each table, and there would be so many rules that they wouldn't even be full in the end. Fortunately, Wang Shang was very young and digested food quickly. It didn't take long for her to compete with some of her younger sisters in the same industry to eat the food in the buffet. The biggest advantage of a buffet was that you could choose food at any time according to your appetite. Then, you could put it on a plate and start eating. There was no need to pay attention to any rules, and there was no need to wait for the guests to call you and fall into an awkward situation. This was the favorite way of eating for young people. They had enough of the rules at home and could finally let go of themselves for once. Of course, they were very happy. On the other hand, when officials like Kuang Yi saw the food, their eyes widened and they felt that it was a waste. Some of the more observant people did a rough calculation. They were afraid that tonight's entertainment would cost a lot of money. Yu Qian and Shen Yu also brought a group of Yangxia officials to join the welcome banquet. Compared to most of the southern Ming officials who were at a loss or ate and drank to their heart's content, the Yangxia officials who were used to this kind of scene just held a cup of wine and casually chatted with others. In addition, all of the Yangxia officials were wearing gray Chinese tunic suits, which made them look quite stylish. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. A loud shout sounded, and a group of black cavalry rushed in from the entrance of the banquet hall. They were all dressed in neat military uniforms. After entering the banquet hall, they guarded the main roads and stood on both sides. They didn't delay everyone's meal and could guarantee that they could control the situation and deal with any unexpected situations. After waiting for these Longwei officials to stand in their positions, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's hand and strode into the banquet hall with Luan Shaoqian, Lung Song, and other officers in military uniforms. Today, Yang Chendong was wearing a marshal's military uniform, which was rare, and it made him look particularly energetic. When the shiny black leather shoes landed on the red carpet, everyone's attention was instantly drawn to them. Chapter 1633. Wow, so handsome. Yang Chendong's appearance was seen by many women in the observation group, especially girls like Wang Shang. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise. There were also countless girls whose eyes were already filled with little stars. Yang Chendong was only 37 years old. This was the age when men were at their most charming. Coupled with the military uniform, he looked even more energetic. In particular, his innate temperament gave people a sense of vigor and vigor. This was something that many southern Ming officials did not have. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. This was especially true for the older ladies and their wives, who all looked at him with watery eyes. Little girls like Wang Shang, who looked like an uncle, were even more attractive. At this moment, even Kuang Yi, who wanted to argue with Yang Chendong, couldn't help but sigh. At least in terms of appearance, Yang Chendong was impeccable. Holding Hu Yan's hand, Yang Chendong entered with a smile. He looked around as if he didn't have a focal point, but he also seemed to see everyone in his eyes, giving people a feeling of being valued. At this moment, Hu Yan was also smiling like a flower. The noble temperament of a queen was undeniable. Walking together with Yang Chendong, she gave people the feeling that they were young girls. Applause quickly sounded in the banquet hall. Yu Qian, Shen Yu, Luan Shaoqian, Lung Song, and Long Tainan, who was in charge of security, led the applause. Soon, the hall was enveloped in warm applause. Influenced by this, the Southern Ming observation group also applauded, causing the atmosphere to reach its peak. Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of speaking. He had just arrived in Crimson City and didn't know much about this place. As such, it was still too early for him to say anything. It was better to let everyone see and understand him first before he spoke. At that time, the meaning would be more than 100 times greater. Yang Chendong, who didn't have any intention of speaking, held a wine glass and lightly clinked glasses with Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, Xie Chong, and the others. Regardless of whether they were on the same side or not, they all had smiles on their faces as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. However, this harmonious atmosphere quickly changed due to Kuang Ye's arrival. Although Kuang Ye was over 80 years old, he quickly squeezed in front of Yang Chendong because of his tall stature and the fact that he had practiced martial arts when he was young. In response to Kuang Ye's arrival, Chen Sun and the others naturally made way for him. At the same time, they couldn't help but take a step back. They had seen Kuang Ye's performance along the way, so they naturally didn't think that Kuang Ye was here to bond. The truth was no different from what everyone had guessed. As soon as Kuang Ye squeezed in, he put on a fake smile and said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, Wu Nan Wang is so mighty. So it's Du Kuang, long time no see. Seeing Kuang Yi squeeze his way in, Yang Chendong, as the host, put on an appropriate smile. Kuang Yi acted as if he didn't see Yang Chendong's goodwill. Instead, he said sourly, Bugnam of Gojoseon, to think that you've always been the best to the Han people. To think that you once told this old man that money should be spent wisely. But look at this banquet hall. The food prepared here must be expensive. With this money, wouldn't it be better to leave this food for the people? Why waste it here? Once the word waste came out, Chun Sun, Wang Zhua, and Xiechang's expressions immediately turned ugly. What was waste? Was it a waste to let everyone eat? Was it not a waste to let the people eat? This was clearly Kuang Yi looking for trouble. At this moment, everyone's impression of him had a trace of disgust. On the other hand, Yang Chendong's expression didn't change. He understood Kuang Yi. The information sent by the intelligence department also showed that this old man wasn't very particular about his food. He didn't have extravagant expectations of delicacies, as long as he was full. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he would say something like this. However, this was his own welcome banquet after all. As the host, Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't look too good if he said something like this at such an occasion. Yang Chendong had always been the type of person who would return the favor 10 times over. How could he be polite? He gently swirled his wine cup and then raised his head, asking word by word, Waste? Haha, Sir Kuang, you're really ignorant. The change from Du Kuang to Sir Kuang already proved Yang Chendong's attitude. At this moment, Kuang Yi clearly didn't notice this. He only heard Yang Chendong say that he was ignorant. He immediately became furious, and his voice rose 2 pitches as he asked, Bugnam of Gojoseon, what do you have to say? His raised voice immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the banquet hall. Originally, because of Yang Chendong's appearance, many people intentionally or unintentionally gathered here. Now that Kuang Yi had shouted, everyone's attention and curiosity were all drawn here. Kuang Yi was angry, and his face was full of anger. However, Yang Chendong didn't care about this. Instead, he chuckled and said in a voice that wasn't loud, but could be heard clearly by the people around him, Sir Kuang, haven't you heard of the ancient saying that reason doesn't depend on one's voice? Also, this prince doesn't agree with your words of waste. A person living in this world can eat better and wear better clothes through their own efforts. What's wrong with that? Do we have to eat chaff and swallow vegetables? If that's the case, then what's the meaning of life? After being reprimanded by Yang Chendong, Kuang Ye's face became even uglier. However, he didn't lose his composure because he had already thought of the consequences of his words. Therefore, facing Yang Chendong, he didn't back down and said, There's nothing wrong with a person's pursuit. However, the ancient people also said that if one achieves success, they will help the world. You, Bugnam of Gojoseon, boasted that you will lead the Han people to a better life. Have you done it? You're eating and drinking here, but have you thought about whether the people outside have food to eat? Even if it's just eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, can you do it? Of course I can do it. Almost without hesitation, Yang Chendong said this sentence. Then, he turned around and looked at the people attending the banquet and said, Since this prince has said that he will give the people a better life, then he will naturally do it. This point, everyone can find the answer during the inspection of Qiqian City. If there really are people starving to death on the streets, or as Kuang Yi said, most of the people are eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, then you can curse this prince. This prince will accept it. On the other hand, if the people really live a better life under this prince's lead and don't have to worry about food and clothing, then this prince would like to ask you, Kuang Yi, what will you do? Kuang Yi was truly stunned at this moment. He originally thought that after he criticized Yang Chendong would find all kinds of reasons to explain himself. Then, he would pretend to be magnanimous and let him off. This way, he would be able to show his magnanimity and suppress Yang Chendong's arrogance. This would be very beneficial for the future interactions between Ming and Yang Xie. But he never expected that Yang Hodong had no intention of backing down at all. Instead, he accepted his challenge. At this moment, he was first shocked, then he was overjoyed. What a good Yang Chendong. Sure enough, he boasted shamelessly. He actually dared to boast like this. If that was the case, then he was asking for a beating. If that was the case, then he would not be polite anymore. Okay, if everything is as Bugnam of Gojosian said, then this old man will apologize on the spot and turn around to leave. Kwang Yi said heroically, "Very good. I hope that some people will keep their words." His gaze landed on Kwang Yi. Yang Qindong's expression was very calm, as if he had already won the bet. This was only a small interlude in the banquet, because Yang Qindong soon left. This was the first time everyone had met. He would not be of any use if he stayed. On the contrary, he would give everyone a sense of pressure and make everyone unhappy. With Yang Qindong's departure, the banquet hall became lively again. Wang Zhuo also found an opportunity to come to Yu Qian's side. The two of them were old officials of the great Ming dynasty and had interacted before. Because they admired each other's character, their relationship was not bad. Now that there was an opportunity, of course they had to have a good chat. Wang Zhuo first observed Yu Qian and found that he did not feel unhappy because of Kwang Ye's interference. Instead, he had a smile on his face and seemed to be in a good mood. He asked curiously, "Yu Qian, I'm sure you saw what happened just now. Are you not worried about your king at all?" "Worried? Why should I be worried?" Yu Qian asked in confusion. Wang Zhuo was also surprised. He thought to himself, "Can we still have a good chat?" However, he still said, "Yu Qian, are you not afraid that Grand Tutor Kwang will really wander around Crimson City?" "Why should I be afraid?" Yu Qian asked again. Then, he chuckled and said, "Wang Zhuo, since the king dares to say this, there is naturally no problem. That's right, if Wang Zhuo does not believe me, you can also look around the city. If you really find people who cannot afford to eat or wear clothes, tell me at any time. I am also willing to apologize like the king." After saying this, Xinyu came to find Yu Qian and said that there were a few officials there who wanted to ask him some questions. Soon, only Wang Zhuo was left. At this moment, Wang Zhuo was rooted to the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. He understood Yu Qian. He was definitely a man of action and was also a bit idealistic. There was no problem with this kind of person doing things, but because he was too righteous, it was easy for him to offend people. If he wanted others to admire him, it was basically impossible. This kind of person would not boast. But what did he just say? He even told him to look around the city. If this wasn't boasting, then what was? Chapter 1634. Even when the great Ming dynasty was at its wealthiest, there were still beggars in the capital. That was something that the emperors of the great Ming dynasty could not achieve even after putting in so much effort. How many years had it been since Crimson City was built? How could there not be a single person who could not afford to eat? Also, what did Yu Qian call Yang Qindong? King. That was not king, but king. Even though it was just a single word, there was a lot more to it. This was enough to prove Yu Qian's admiration and even trust towards Yang Qindong. What kind of person was Yu Qian? He was definitely a role model for all officials. He would only treat the commoners well and would never lower his head to the nobles. Even when he was in the great Ming dynasty, the emperor was unable to make him lower his head. But now, he actually respected Yang Qindong so much. What was going on? Could it be that Yang Qindong's kindness towards the commoners had surpassed Yu Qian's understanding and had gained his recognition? Could it be that the truth was as Yang Qindong had said, that there were no commoners in Crimson City who could not afford to eat? No, that's impossible. A voice shouted in Wang Zhuo's mind. Since ancient times, there had never been a dynasty that could provide enough food for all the commoners. At most, 60 to 70% of the commoners would have sufficient food and clothing. After all, not everyone was willing to work hard. There would always be those who were lazy. Shaking his head, Wang Zhuo could not understand. However, Wang Zhuo had already made up his mind. While he was in Crimson City, he had to walk around and see if Yang Qindong and Yu Qian were lying or if it was the truth. If the commoners were truly living good lives, wouldn't that mean that Yang Hodong was not only skilled in war, but also in governance? If that was the case, it would be a blessing for the commoners to hand the southern Ming dynasty over to him. On the other side, Kwang Yi also retreated, and Captain Ku Hong quickly came up to welcome him. Kwang Yi was in good spirits. It was clear that the bet from before had given him quite a bit of confidence. When he saw Ka Hong and the other two centurions, he said excitedly. Tomorrow, all of you will split up and have a good look around the city. Humph. Let this old man expose Bugnam of Gojoseon's lies. Of course, Kwang Yi didn't think that all the people in Chichen City could have enough food and clothing. This was simply impossible. As for why Yang Chendong dared to say this, it must be because the other party was prepared and would hide those people. Since that was the case, as long as they looked carefully, there was no need to worry about not finding any clues. At that time, he wanted to see how ugly Yang Chendong's expression would be. At that time, he would use this momentum to raise the diplomatic issue between the Southern Ming dynasty and Yang Xie. Presumably, there would be a breakthrough. Facing Kwang Ye's orders, Ku Hong and the other centurions naturally couldn't help but nod. Although they were shocked by Yang Xie's generosity and were envious of the Yang Xie's lifestyle, they knew that their families were still in the Southern Ming dynasty. They would eventually have to go back, so they had to listen to Sir Kwang Ye's words. At this time, it wasn't just Kwang Yi. Many people were also doubting Yang Chendong's words. Those who could join the observation group were naturally wealthy, but this didn't mean that they hadn't seen poor people or beggars before. After all, it was precisely because there were poor people that they were called rich, right? Many people also decided to look around tomorrow. They didn't believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon could hide those people so well. They didn't believe that they couldn't find a single one of them. When the banquet ended, many people made such a decision in their hearts. But for most of the family members, they were attracted by the neon lights on the road outside the hotel. Looking out the window of the hotel, people were walking to and fro on the streets. Under the illumination of the straight cement road lamps, everyone was talking and laughing. There were even some young people walking on the streets hand in hand. They didn't care about the gazes of outsiders at all. And from their clothes, they were all wearing bright clothes. Everyone had a happy expression on their faces. This scene was impossible to see in the capital of Nanjing. First of all, there was a curfew in the capital. Once night fell, no one was allowed to walk on the street. How could there be any excitement? Second, even if there was no curfew, it was dark everywhere. If one wasn't careful, one would step into a ditch. Who would be willing to go out in such an environment? As for the third, there were no entertainment facilities in the capital at night. Even if one went out, what could they do? In comparison, the scenery outside the Yangxie Hotel was very different. Wang Shang stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the room and looked outside. Her heart was itching. At this moment, there was a slight knock on the door. With a trace of doubt, Wang Shang opened the door and saw her brother, Wang Zhiqing. At this time, Wang Zhiqing was already dressed. He didn't look like he was going to sleep at all. After seeing his sister, the first thing he said was, "I'm going to call a few friends to go out for a walk. Do you want to come?" Of course, Wang Zhiqing wasn't being kind. He called his sister because he was afraid that his grandfather would punish him. If his sister followed him, he would have an extra shield. Wang Shang originally had this idea. Now that her brother said it, she couldn't suppress the restlessness in her heart. She immediately nodded and said, Okay, wait for me to put on my coat." Wang Shang and Wang Zhiqing quickly went out of the room. They called a few young friends, and the group of people went downstairs. Here, they saw the police in charge of security. While they were still thinking about whether going out would be prohibited, a police officer took the initiative to come up and ask them what they wanted. With a trace of nervousness and apprehension, Wang Zhiqing spoke his mind. Then, he said that if it was inconvenient, they wouldn't go out. However, to their surprise, the police only smiled and began to ask for their names. Then, some temporary identification documents were handed to them. "You can go out, but you must have identification documents. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if you encounter a patrol officer." "Okay, now that you have these identification documents, there won't be any problems." After saying that, the police officer took the initiative to step aside and completely let them through the door behind him. After taking the identification documents, Wang Zhiqing, Wang Shang, and the others walked out of the Yang family hotel excitedly. However, what they didn't know was that behind them, a small team of 10 police officers in casual clothes was following them not far away. No matter what, they were still an observation team from the Southern Ming dynasty. If their personal safety was threatened in the Southern Ming dynasty, it would be equivalent to slapping Yang Xie and Bugnam of Gojoseon in the face. It would be equivalent to the police force not doing their job well. After leaving the Yang family hotel, Wang Ziqing walked in the direction of the crowd. After walking for more than 2 miles, he saw a square that covered an area of dozens of acres. There were many young and middle-aged people dancing here. The dance music was played by several loudspeakers around the square. It was very rhythmic, allowing people to quickly integrate into the rhythm. Outside the square, there were small stalls everywhere. Some of them sold food, and some sold all kinds of trinkets. Basically, there were some people surrounding each stall. From afar, it gave people a very lively feeling. This place is really bustling. Wang Ziqing stood on the spot when he saw this scene. This scene could not be seen in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Perhaps it could only be seen on the 15th day of the first lunar month when there were lanterns. However, that was only because there were many people. In terms of entertainment and food, it could not be compared to here. Isn't that so? This place is really good. I don't want to leave anymore, Wang Shang said with emotion. However, when Wang Shang heard this sentence, his expression changed involuntarily. At this moment, he could not help but have some thoughts in his mind. It was only when his companion strode forward and began to beckon him to hurry up that Wang Ziqing replied, "Coming." Then, he followed and blended into the crowd. There were delicious food, fun things, and even acrobatics. There were many things that Wang Ziqing and the others had heard of but never seen before. After asking about the price, they found out that it was not very expensive. At least, for officials like them, they could definitely afford it. Therefore, it did not take long for them to be filled with all kinds of spoils of war. After buying a lot of things and chatting with some merchants, they found out that there was more than one square like this in Sushian City. This was the central city district, and it was also the largest square. There were many similar squares in the other 4 districts. There were even such squares in some residential areas. However, due to the large population, most of the squares were not as lively as this one. Hearing that there was more than one such place, Wang Ziqing was truly shocked. Out of instinct, he asked the merchant about the taxes. He had estimated that every stall was extremely lively. There were many people lining up in front of it. In this way, there would be a lot of transactions in one night. The profits would not be small, so the business tax should be quite high. Ah, you're talking about the business tax. We are a small business, so it's only 10%. The stall owner was clearly someone who was willing to chat. There was no taboo on this topic. 10% business tax? How do we collect that? Wang Ziqing was puzzled. He finally understood that 10% of the transactions in one night would be used to pay the tax. However, how would the tax collection department know how many transactions there were? Damn it, Bugnam of Gojoseon has created such good conditions for us Han people. Of course, we have to be content. Naturally, there are also people who are unaware. However, there are many workers in this square. They will secretly record the transactions of the stalls and compare them later. If anyone was caught for tax evasion, they would be locked up in prison and forced to do hard labor. With such a good life in front of them, no one dares to play with such thoughts. Chapter 1635. Self-awareness? Hearing this, Wang Ziqing was extremely surprised. However, when he calmed down and thought about it carefully, he was relieved. If it was him, he would not play any tricks on the tax system in such a good environment. Moreover, the boss had just said that there were people who were caught for tax evasion and were treated as examples. This was enough to deter others. With such soft and hard methods, it was no wonder that everyone would cooperate fully. Naturally, all of this was based on the fairness of the tax collectors. If it was in the southern Ming dynasty, who knew what those small officials would do for their own selfish reasons? In the end, even a good policy needed to be implemented by people. If the right people could not be found, no matter how good the policy was, it would be a waste. However, the Yangxie was extremely strict with the corruption of officials. Officials could not do business. This was already an iron law. Reputation and money could not be taken away by one person, right? Officials also had to regularly assess their performance. If their performance was poor 3 times in a row, they would be fired. This was the saying, the capable are the top, and the mediocre are the bottom. Officials were strictly prohibited from using their authority and receiving benefits. Once discovered, 3 generations of officials were not allowed to do business, and 5 generations were not allowed to be officials. Then, they could only rely on working for others to earn money. Facing such a severe punishment, there were not many people who dared to test the law. Speaking of which, under such a severe punishment, the treatment of officials was really good. Not only were their monthly salaries high, but they also enjoyed 2 holidays a year. During the holidays, there were also subsidies from the government, allowing the officials to walk around and look around. With the basic salary, it was very easy for an official to support a dozen people. There were also various protective measures for officials. For example, if an official was sick, they could be reimbursed. In other words, it was basically free. There was also a pension for officials when they retired, which could ensure that they could live well in their old age. With all kinds of protective measures, the officials did not have any worries and could do things without worry. This was completely different from the Southern Ming Dynasty officials, who relied on their salary as a supplement and corruption as their main source of income. As an official in the Southern Ming Dynasty, if there was no gray income, it was basically very difficult to survive. This directly led to the big officials being greedy and the small officials being greedy. Regarding all of this, even Emperor Ingzong could only turn a blind eye. He couldn't be ruthless. Otherwise, those officials who relied on their salary might not even be able to live as well as some of the tyrants. If that was the case, why did he do that? How could he not hear it? Qianli became an official only for wealth. That night, Wang Zhiqing heard a lot and saw a lot. His mind was almost stuffed with thoughts. His thoughts suddenly seemed to have entered another world. He suddenly realized that some things could be done this way, and they could be done even better after doing so. In the same small courtyard, Yang Lu was sitting on a chair listening to Yang Ying's report. "Master, the people we sent out have returned. They said that the members of the observation group are accompanied by the police when they go out, so there is no chance to make a move." No chance? Yang Lu's face showed displeasure. For others, the arrival of the observation group from the Southern Ming Dynasty might not be obvious. They might just think that Yang Xie was expressing his goodwill to the Southern Ming Dynasty. However, Yang Chendong was very clear that this was clearly Yang Chendong trying to win people's hearts and show off his muscles. Perhaps when the observation group returned to the Southern Ming Dynasty, waves would rise. At that time, Emperor Ingzong would suffer the consequences of his own actions. In order to prevent Yang Chendong from achieving his goal, Yang Lu was prepared to sabotage. If someone in the observation group was killed, the most important person would be killed, then the observation group would be in danger. Then, they would no longer have the mood to stay in Crimson City. Naturally, this plan would be ruined. However, he didn't expect that the police force would be dispatched. However, Yang Lu still said with some dissatisfaction, "From what I know, the Wolfang Special Forces is not in Crimson City. It's just a few policemen. Can they really stop the assassins we sent out?" Seeing that Yang Lu was doubting his ability, Yang Ying quickly explained, "Master, the strength of the police force is not bad. Especially in the past few years, because of sufficient funds, the police force has undergone a lot of training. Although they may not be able to display the strength of a real soldier on the battlefield, they are still quite capable in the area of local protection. Of course, no matter how powerful they are, they can't be compared to our people. However, if our people make a move, I'm afraid it will be difficult to escape from the police force. After all, there are too many of them. Just in Crimson City, the police force has reached more than 60,000 people. It's difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Once our people are caught, I'm afraid it will affect the later part of the plan." Listening to these explanations, Yang Lu could only put away his thoughts of sabotaging. However, he still muttered in dissatisfaction, "There are more than 60,000 policemen in Crimson City. Are they crazy? How much money do they have to spend?" At this point, Yang Lu couldn't help but let out a long sigh. When it comes to money, Yang Shi is really not short of money now, especially when the Navy is constantly winning. Under their strong ships and cannons, it doesn't take long for the various countries and forces that are targeted by them to be hit hard, and then they can only choose to surrender. After that, a large amount of gold and silver was sent back to Crimson City via the transport ship. With money, it would naturally be easier to do things. Of course, it wouldn't be difficult to recruit people. Moreover, he had already heard that not all of the 60,000 policemen would be stationed in Crimson City. In the end, more than half of them would be arranged to be stationed in other Yangtze territories. They were only doing their internships now. This was just a matter of spending more money. Thinking about the 60,000 policemen, there wouldn't be any problems with the safety of the 15,000 South Ming observation group. If he really wanted to make a move, the chances of him being caught were very high. In the end, he could only shake his head and say to Yang Ying, then forget it. This risk isn't worth it. That's right. Yang Ying agreed. Then he seemed to have thought of something and said, Zhu Huiyun isn't to blame. If he had attacked with all his might, Yang Chendong would have died in Yunnan Manor, and Imogue wouldn't have died. That's right. Imogue was Yang Ying's confidant. The uncling that Imogue mentioned was Yang Ying. Unfortunately, because of Zhu Huiyun's carelessness, Imogue died in the end. When he heard the news, Yang Ying was really sad for a while. Not to mention Yang Lu and Yang Ying's helplessness. The next morning, Wang Songshi saw that it was time for breakfast. Her grandson and granddaughter weren't up yet, so she went outside the room and woke them up. When two of the family of four were yawning during breakfast, Wang's face became ugly as he said, I told you guys to rest early. Look at you guys. Didn't you sleep last night? We slept, but it was too late, Wang Shang said casually. As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately covered her mouth with her right hand. Obviously, she knew that she had spilled the beans. Seeing that his sister had confessed so quickly, Wang Zhiqing sighed at his sister's lack of composure and took the initiative to confess everything to Wang Zua. At the same time, he also told him what he had seen and heard that night. At first, Wang Zua was eating while listening, as if he didn't pay much attention to it. Young people were curious about everything and liked to join in the fun. It was normal for him to have such a reaction. However, when he heard about how lively the square was and how there were over 10,000 people gathered there, his expression finally changed. He put down the chopsticks in his hand and listened attentively. From time to time, he would nod his head and cooperate with Wang Zhiqing's explanation. Finally, Wang Zhiqing gave a general idea of what had happened. He stopped and took the initiative to drink a mouthful of porridge. Then he looked at his grandfather, who was silent. He knew that his grandfather was thinking about something, so he didn't disturb him and just ate by himself. He had to walk around more today. If he didn't eat his fill, he wouldn't be able to stay strong. When Wang Zhiqing was almost done with his meal, Wang Zua, who was sitting opposite him, finally opened his mouth. Chung, have you calculated how much money you can get from the square you saw yesterday? Wang Zhiqing hurriedly put down his chopsticks and said without hesitation, Grandfather, grandson has calculated. Even if it wasn't 30,000 taels, it should be at least 25,000 taels. That much? Then doesn't that mean that the tax collected from Yangtze in one night is close to 3,000 taels? That's close to 100,000 taels a month? Over 1,000,000 taels a month? And this is just a square? Obviously, this answer really shocked Wang Zua. Yes, Wang Zhiqing said with a firm expression. He was also shocked when he came to this conclusion. It had to be said that this was because the quality of the food and the quality of the goods sold in the square was good. In addition, there was a lot of traffic. Moreover, the people of Qin City seemed to be very wealthy and didn't lack money. Just the square alone could collect 1,000,000 taels a year in taxes. This was equivalent to 2 months of taxes for the entire Southern Ming dynasty. One had to know that the current Southern Ming dynasty didn't have 3 provinces. In a year, the taxes collected were only 7 to 8 million taels. This was also because the Southern Ming dynasty was very rich. If it was Ming, it wouldn't be that much. In comparison, the difference in money was too great. These two were not opponents of the same level. If they were to fight on the same stage, what would the result be? Presumably, even an idiot would be able to tell. At this moment, Wang Zua was even more silent. He seemed to have already seen the scene of the Southern Ming dynasty being swallowed up by Yangtze. The only thing to consider was how long the Southern Ming dynasty could last. Chapter 1636. Although there were all sorts of delicious breakfasts in front of him, Wang Zua was unable to swallow any of them. When he saw that his family had finished eating, he stood up resolutely. He had decided to properly observe and investigate Crimson City. He wanted to find out where the drawbacks of this city were. Not only Wang Zhua, but basically all the members of the observation group left Yangxia Hotel after breakfast and headed in different directions. They were followed by a large number of police officers. This was for their safety, so no one objected to it. More than 10,000 members of the observation group were like gusts of wind, blowing in all directions of Crimson City. Very quickly, several city districts were filled with their people. Some factories were also filled with their people, and some shops and department stores were also filled with their people. After an entire day, all the way until evening, these people began to return one after another from all over the place. If one observed carefully, they would notice that most of the officials had a serious expression on their faces. Only the accompanying family members, especially the children, would reveal ignorant smiles. Clearly, this day's visit allowed everyone to see the strength and potential of Crimson City. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the huge gap between southern Ming and Yangxia. This day's visit allowed everyone to see the prosperity and beautiful life of Crimson City. If it wasn't for the purpose of nitpicking, even Kuang Yi had to admit that Crimson City was a very suitable city to live in. The security here was stable. If one had money here, one could sell many things. If one didn't have money here, as long as one was willing to work hard, one could also earn a lot of money and live a better life. The commoners here were not as sickly as the commoners of the southern Ming Empire. On the contrary, they were full of vigor and walked with a spring in their step. When the commoners here walked on the streets, they walked as if they were flying. They knew that time was money and were using every minute to work hard. The commoners here had more and better prospects for the future. They were far from the lazy and dispirited southern Ming Empire commoners who did not know where to go. The commoners here, the more they compared, the greater the gap. The hearts of the southern Ming officials became heavier and heavier. Kuang Ye's mood was very bad today. He brought Ko Hong and the other two and split into two directions to look for the citizens who couldn't afford to eat in Crimson City. Unfortunately, they didn't find any. There were as many factories as there were hairs on a cow in Crimson City, and there were also many jobs. As long as one had the strength to survive, one could live a good life after suffering a little. As for those who didn't work, they had long been sent to the labor camp by the police. This wasn't done because of the Southern Ming Observation Group, but because it had always been one of the rules. In Yang Qindong's words, some people needed to be taught a lesson. If they didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't know how precious their freedom. The facts also prove that Yang Qindong's ruthless methods were correct. Once someone was identified as a lazy person, the local resident committee would report it. Once it was reported twice in a row, the police would take action and arrest them on the grounds of laziness and send them to the labor camp. Although this was a bit unreasonable, the effect was good, because after these people were released, they became diligent. Compared to not being able to get money and freedom after working in the labor camp, it was better to work hard after being released. At least they not only had freedom, but they could also use the money they earned. Under such a policy, it was naturally impossible for Kuang Yi to find the kind of people he mentioned. But only one day had passed. Kuang Yi wasn't discouraged. He decided to continue his search. On this night, when everyone gathered in the hotel to eat dinner, Yu Qian and Shen Yu came again. During the day, the two didn't appear and didn't accompany anyone to look at any place. They were completely free. After a day of observation and visit, they believed that the Southern Ming Observation Group should have a basic understanding of Crimson City, so they appeared again. When they appeared this time, the two gave the Southern Ming Observation Group a big gift, which was 370,000 Yang coins. Previously, in order to welcome the Southern Ming Observation Group, Yang Qindong took out 5 million silver and 370,000 Yang coins. The silver was used to entertain, such as food and accommodation, in the end, had to be paid to the Yang Qindong. Although these were all Yang Qindong's businesses, it was equivalent to putting his left hand into his right pocket. This was also to prevent people from reaching out their hands. The silver was used to entertain, but the Yang coins were to be given to the observation group. So when Yu Qian and Shen Yu said that as long as they were in the observation group, regardless of age or status, everyone would receive 100 Yang coins, many young people jumped up in excitement. Unlike the Southern Ming officials, These young people didn't have any intention to nitpick. They were here to broaden their horizons and have fun. Today, many people went to the Young Families department store because the things there were the most complete and the best in the entire Crimson City. After arriving at the Young Families department store, they really saw a lot of things that they liked, especially the exquisite watches that could keep track of time, as well as the bicycles and electric scooters. They couldn't bear to part with them and were unwilling to put them down. Unfortunately, these things couldn't be bought with silver. They needed Yang coins. When they were really worried about what to do, Yuqian and Xinyu came and gave them Yang coins. How could they not be happy? Although they couldn't buy anything with 100 Yang coins, they could borrow it from others. In this way, if they gathered together, it would be a large sum of money and they could buy the things they liked. So after Yuqian and Xinyu announced this decision, they jumped up in joy. Then, whether it was their parents or grandparents who came with them, they all asked to borrow Yang coins. The officials who only cared about learning and watching the changes in Crimson City didn't know the importance of Yang coins. When they saw their family members asking for it, they didn't pay much attention and took out the 100 Yang coins that they had just received. After the young people received the Yang coins, they were naturally elated. They were all overjoyed. Tomorrow, they could go to the Young Families department store and buy the things they liked. After Yuqian and Xinyu saw that the staff had finished distributing the coins, they continued, "Everyone, tomorrow you can go to any factory in Crimson City other than the palace, even the military barracks. If you are willing to go, you can also go to any factory in the city. However, you must apply a day in advance. If you want to go, you can tell our staff later. After the necessary registration, you can go to any place you want to go tomorrow." Is this true? The Minister of Personnel, Chun Sun, immediately stood up from his seat. He wanted to go to the City Lord's Manor to take a look today and see how they dealt with the ordinary affairs and the selection and promotion of officials. However, considering that this should be a secret, he didn't ask. He didn't expect Yang Chendong to take the initiative to think about it for them. Of course it's true. As I said, other than the palace, you can go to any place you want to visit and inspect. Yu Qian nodded heavily. He was also amazed by Yang Chendong's breadth of mind. Thinking about the ancient people, if they had any skills, which one of them didn't hide it, afraid that others would learn it and steal their rice bowls? How could there be someone like Yang Chendong, who would open up everything for you to see and let you learn? As for the palace not being open, it wasn't that there was anything special in the palace. It was just that Yang Chendong didn't want his place to be seen by others. That would be very awkward. Compared to the great Ming dynasty's palace, there wasn't much difference, so it was better not to see it. Chun Sun was very satisfied with this answer. He immediately called the staff over and added the words City Lord's Manor. On the other side, Kuang Yi also quickly found the staff and added the words barracks. The other officials also applied according to their own preferences and interests. After knowing that the application form would be quickly approved and sent to their rooms, and that they could enter as they wished the next morning, all of the Southern Ming officials had a satisfied look on their faces. They didn't know that the reason why Yang Chendong dared to show them those things was that he had already regarded them as Yang Xie's future officials and people. Since everyone would be a family in the future, what was the big deal about seeing what a family looked like in advance? That night, whether it was the officials or their family members, they were all very satisfied. Even the people who went to the night market at night decreased a lot. Obviously, they all wanted to have a good night's sleep so that they would have the energy to go to the goal they had set. After Yuqian and Xinyu completed the task, they sent someone to report the results to Yang Chendong. There was only one answer they got. Although they showed them, Yang coins were absolutely not allowed to be exchanged. Even if the officials came to the door in the name of catching up, they were not allowed to exchange in private. Whoever dared to violate the rules would be severely punished. The reason why they weren't allowed to exchange silver for Yang coins was because of Yang Chendong's small scheme. He was still counting on Yang coins to attract these officials. If they really exchanged Yang coins, then everything would be meaningless. Yang Chendong had already heard about the private exchange of Yang coins from Yang Wu. Some Yangxia officials, because of their large families and businesses, needed more money to support them. They couldn't be corrupt, but they were very lustful. They married a lot of wives and had a lot of children. Their lives were a bit tight. Taking out the Yang coins from their monthly salary to exchange for silver was undoubtedly the best way to make money. Chapter 1637. In the market, the exchange ratio between Yang dollars and silver had already reached a point that people could only look up to. Moreover, there was still a demand but no supply. Therefore, as long as one was willing to exchange Yang dollars, one would get a lot of silver and not have to worry about living. Usually, Yang Chendong would pretend that he didn't see it. After all, who didn't encounter an emergency? However, now that the Southern Ming observation group had arrived, the exchange business had to be stopped. At least, this level was not allowed to exist. This way, he didn't have to worry about the Southern Ming officials being able to satisfy his requests and wishes. With Yang Chendong's instructions, Yang Wu accepted the order and left. However, he knew that the exchange business would be over before tonight. After all, this was an order personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Once violated, even if there were a few heads, it wouldn't be enough to chop off. Even so, who would take the initiative to seek death? The Southern Ming officials didn't know that by the time they realized the importance of Yang dollars, everything was already too late. Just like when Jing, a fellow member of the Brocade Guard who came with the observation group, after learning about Yang Bai, he immediately arranged for a fast boat to leave Qiqian City and go straight to the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty. He had long heard that there were many good things in the Yang family's department store, and that Yang Bai was not the only one who could buy them. In the past, he didn't have it. Now that he had it, he had to gather it and buy the things that he couldn't afford in the past. Unfortunately, by the time he got Zhu Qijian's imperial edict, everything would be too late. The next morning, whether it was the officials or their family members, after a hurried breakfast, they left the Yang family Grand Hotel and went straight to the place they had set their sights on. Chun Sun went to the city lord's residence. When Chun Sun and a group of Southern Ming officials successfully entered the city lord's residence with the application form, they saw the orderly scene of Yang Xie's staff running back and forth in the building. Unlike the Southern Ming court, the officials here walked with the wind. Many times, their footsteps were hurried or jogged. They all looked very busy. Compared to the Southern Ming officials who walked with steady steps, it was completely different. This way, you can train your body and also improve your work efficiency. After all, Yang Xie has dozens of provinces and regions under his control. There are many things that he has to deal with every day. The person in charge of accompanying them was an official sent by the city lord mansion. After seeing everyone's puzzled expression, he explained, "I see." Chun Sun and the others nodded. They actually wanted to be busy, but they only had the Southern Ming Kingdom. Moreover, after losing Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi, the area under their control was even smaller. They were no longer as busy as before. Even if they wanted to be busy, they couldn't. Because it was said before that everyone could look at the city lord's mansion, but they could not disturb the normal work here, so Chun Sun and the others had to walk together and not be separated. Otherwise, the city lord's mansion would send a large number of officials to explain and accompany them, which in itself was not a small amount of pressure. Fortunately, this request was acceptable to everyone. In fact, they were already very satisfied to be able to come in and take a look. Who would ask for more? What's that? Chun Sun, who was walking in the crowd, noticed that a black thing suddenly rang. Then, he saw someone walk forward to pick it up and say something. But there was clearly nothing in front of that person. There was only a wall. Who was he talking to? Not only Chun Sun, but some of the Southern Ming Kingdom's officials also noticed it, but they didn't dare to ask casually because of their low status. Now that the minister took the lead, the others naturally became interested. Oh, that's a telephone. Every telephone has its own number and corresponds to a department. If you need to find someone, you don't have to go far to the city lord's mansion. You just need to call this number and say who you are looking for. The accompanying official said proudly, then looked at the Southern Ming Kingdom's officials with a trace of disdain. He was clearly saying that they were a group of bumpkins. In fact, more than a month ago, when the telephone was first set up, his reaction was not much better than these Southern Ming Kingdom's officials after learning about its function. He was also dumbfounded. So powerful? Can this old man give it a try? Chun Sun's face was full of surprise, but there was a trace of disbelief in his words. Of course you can, as long as no one is using the telephone. The accompanying official smiled at Chen Sun. He probably also knew that this person was the Minister of Personnel of the Southern Ming Kingdom and was also a high-ranking official. Perhaps after the Yangxia annexed the Southern Ming Kingdom, everyone would be colleagues. The other party might even be his superior, so his attitude was quite good. At this time, the person who answered the phone put down the phone and walked out of the office. It was obvious that he had something to do or convey. Looking at the empty black phone, Chen Sun was eager to give it a try. Chen Sun, no one is using it right now. You can give it a try, the accompanying official said with an encouraging tone. Then I'll give it a try. Chen Sun straightened his body and walked straight to the telephone, as if he had made a decision. Behind him and beside him were a group of Southern Ming Kingdom's officials. Obviously, everyone was very interested. Under everyone's expectant gaze, Chen Sun came in front of the black telephone and reached out with his trembling hand to pick up the phone. However, he quickly put it down again. When everyone was confused, Chen Sun asked a question that made everyone burst out laughing. How do I use this thing? Cough. The accompanying official forcefully suppressed his laughter and quickly explained. Chen Sun, shake it first, then pick up the phone and just say who you are looking for. Of course, the prerequisite is that you know which department the other party is from. Oh, okay. Then I'll look for Yu Gong. He's the city lord of the City Lord Mansion, right? When he thought of Yu Qian's self-introduction, Chen Sun had a target. He reached out to the telephone again and picked it up first. Then, he shook the black telephone. When he felt the voice coming from the other side, he opened his mouth and said, I'm looking for City Lord Yu Qian. Okay, please wait a moment. The person who answered the phone hesitated for a moment. After all, Yu Qian was very busy with work, and not just anyone could find him. However, when he saw that the call was from the City Lord Mansion, he didn't think much of it. Immediately, a pleasant and polite female voice sounded. Okay, please wait a moment. Then, there was a beeping sound from the phone. After about 2 breaths, there was another beeping sound. Just when Chen Sun was about to question whether the phone could be used, Yu Qian's authoritative voice came from the other side. Hello, I'm Yu Qian. Who are you? Chen Sun was very familiar with Yu Qian's voice. Therefore, when he heard the voice, he was sure that he had found the right person. However, he was also shocked and didn't know what to say for a moment. Obviously, when the call went through, he was shocked. Hello, who are you? I'm Yu Qian. Why are you looking for me? Yu Qian's energetic voice came from the other side of the phone again. Because the phone had been moved away from Chen Sun's ear, the voice that came from the other side of the phone could be heard clearly even by the people outside. After recognizing that it was indeed Yu Qian's voice, everyone had a look of amazement on their faces. With Yu Qian's continuous questioning, Chen Sun finally woke up. He quickly put the phone to his ear and said, Sir Yu, I'm Chen Sun. Oh, Sir Chen. After a slight hesitation, Yu Qian's laughter came out. Obviously, he had already guessed the purpose of the other party's call. Obviously, he didn't believe in the function of this phone and wanted to try it himself. After laughing, Yu Qian didn't say too much. He only said that he would go to the hotel to chat with Chen Sun after work today. Then, he put down the phone. The beeping sound was already heard from the phone. Chen Sun reluctantly put it down, then shook his head and said with a sigh, This thing is really good. It can save a lot of time to find people, and it can also improve the efficiency of work. By the way, I wonder where this phone can reach? As long as it's a place with a telephone line, you can reach it. For example, this phone can reach any place in Raymond City with a telephone. The escort explained patiently, and all of the Southern Ming officials were even more amazed. Think about it, if this was really the case, then the entire Southern Ming dynasty could be connected by phone. Wouldn't that mean that the emperor could find whoever he wanted? How much work efficiency would be improved? It was simply unimaginable. Forget it. Chen Sun was excited and wanted to ask if this phone could be set up in the Southern Ming dynasty, but he quickly gave up on this idea. Yang Chendong was no longer the Yang Chendong from before. In terms of strength, he was far more powerful than the Southern Ming dynasty. Why would he listen to him and set up a telephone line for the Southern Ming dynasty? This was clearly impossible to achieve. Raymond City Military Camp. Kuang Yi brought some Southern Ming officials who were curious about the strength of the 5-star army and appeared outside the door. After showing the application form, everyone was escorted into the military camp by a lieutenant colonel. Just like the city lord's mansion, the arrival of the observation group didn't affect the work of the soldiers here. They were training and doing what they were supposed to do. Kwang Yi had his own ideas. He wanted to see what the 5-star officers were doing every day and how the soldiers at the bottom were trained. To meet these requirements, this military camp could satisfy all of his requirements. Kwang Yi had his own ideas. He wanted to see what the 5-star officers were doing every day. At the same time, he wanted to see how the soldiers at the bottom were trained. This military camp could satisfy all of his requirements. Chapter 1638. After entering the military camp, on a flat ground, a group of 5-star soldiers wearing vests were undergoing training for a 500-meter special obstacle course. Although it was already November, because of the unique climate of Crimson City, it was still very warm. Especially under the training, the soldiers were sweating a lot, so they were wearing very cool clothes. What a disgrace, Kwang Yi said angrily when he saw the soldiers' attire. The southern Ming dynasty's army was very strict about appearance. Even during training, they paid attention to the attire because it represented the face of the country. Since when did they dress so casually like the 5-star army? Although this simple attire could allow the body to relax, the generals didn't dare to do this during training. If anyone dared to do this, they would be impeached by the civil officials and be heavily punished. This was the fundamental difference between two different systems, Kwang Yi said angrily. Clearly, his education didn't allow soldiers to do this. However, this was the 5-star army's barracks, so he couldn't question it. On the other hand, Ku Hong and the others behind him were deep in thought. Ku Hong had led soldiers before, and at the highest level, he was a vice-chinhu. Therefore, he was very clear about what the soldiers needed. Not to mention the difference between the 5-star army's training and theirs, just this casual training was enough to make people envious. As the saying goes, every field has its own specialization. Soldiers should train in the most relaxed environment and not be limited by their attire, which would affect the results of the training. Of course, this was only what he thought. Without orders, no one dared to do this. Therefore, Ku Hong was a bit envious of the soldiers who were training. The 500-meter obstacle course. It trained a person's stamina, endurance, agility, strength, and coordination. Later generations had already proven that this was a very scientific training method. And now, the soldiers who were at the lowest level had to go through this kind of basic training if they wanted to become a soldier of the 5-star army. It was also through this kind of training that the soldiers' bodies were greatly strengthened. On the battlefield, not only could they kill more enemies, but they could also protect their own safety. On both sides of the training ground, there were 2 temporary shelters. In each shelter, there were 2 military doctors wearing white coats. Beside them, there was a large water jug with drinks that could relieve the heat. This was to ensure that the soldiers could quickly replenish themselves when they were short of water. Not far away, there were specialized examiners. They were holding pen and paper to record the soldiers' performance. This was to ensure that the outstanding people would be promoted, the qualified people would stay, and the unqualified people would be kicked out. In fact, after a period of time, there would always be soldiers who were fired. Of course, they wouldn't directly withdraw from the military camp and return to being civilians. Most of them would be sent to the police force to continue their duties for the safety of the people. Only a very few people would return to being civilians because of their poor quality. This way, they could maintain the absolute strength of the 5-star army. This was also the reason why the 5-star army was so famous. Every time there was a recruitment drive, young civilians would fight to join the army. If it was during the recruitment drive, no one would dare to do so. The reason for this was, in Yang Qindong's words, sweat more during training and bleed less during war. If one knew that they could not do it, but still sent them to the battlefield, it would be a sign of irresponsibility for their lives. If these words were said by someone else, there would definitely be a lot of doubts. However, it was completely different when it was said by Yang Qindong. It was the absolute truth. Not to mention, the soldiers selected from this military camp were not ordinary soldiers. There was a high chance that they would enter the Cold Vanguard Army in the future. Naturally, the selection process would be stricter. Kwang Yi could not swallow his pride. So he asked Ko Hong and the others to ask in detail. When they learned more about the situation from the medical officer, the recording personnel, and the security personnel, when they reported it to Kwang Yi, it could be seen that everyone's expression was somewhat unsightly. After all, the five-star army was a potential enemy of the Southern Ming Empire. The stronger they were, the more uneasy the enemy would feel. Let's go and take a look at the other places. Kwang Ye's face darkened. He turned and walked towards the interior of the military camp. He had heard the sound of guns just now, so he wanted to see what the five-star army was doing. This was a shooting range. Hundreds of soldiers who had become qualified Cold Vanguard Army soldiers were doing target practice here. With regards to Kwang Ye's arrival, regardless of whether it was the commander or the ordinary soldiers, they acted as if they did not see him. They continued to aim, fire, report the targets, and record. When he heard the results of the report, Kwang Ye's expression became even uglier. He turned his head and nodded at Ko Hong. The latter nodded in agreement. Then, he jogged to the side of a recording personnel and humbly asked for guidance. "May I ask, how often do you guys do target practice like this? Aren't you guys wasting gunpowder like this?" If it was someone else who asked this, the recording personnel would definitely think that the person was an idiot. This was because everyone in the military camp knew that the munitions factory in Crimson City could produce more than 100,000 bullets every day. In order to improve the military quality of the soldiers, target practice was only a form of training. It was to allow the soldiers to reduce casualties on the battlefield and kill more enemies. How could there be a waste of gunpowder? However, when they saw that the person asking the question was from the Southern Ming Empire's observation team, they immediately understood that it was a country bumpkin asking questions. Right now, in the eyes of the Yangtze staff, the Southern Ming Empire was a country bumpkin. Not long ago, the Great Ming Empire's high and mighty aura no longer existed. In other words, they were looking down on the Great Ming Empire. Just like in history, when China was lagging behind, they were looked down upon by others. This was especially so for the Westerners. Backwardness and poverty were synonymous with China. They had already forgotten that when we built cities with millions of people in Bianliang and Hangzhou, the largest city in Europe, Venice, only had a population of 100,000. Moreover, whether it was the nobles or the commoners, they all urinated and defecated on the streets. Their civilization was far behind ours. However, reality was reality. If you were lagging behind, you would be beaten up. This was an absolute truth. If you were lagging behind, you would be looked down upon. Fortunately, due to the previous discipline, the Southern Ming Empire's officials could still maintain a humble attitude on the surface. Therefore, the recording personnel replied with a good attitude, "It won't be a waste. If you don't train your marksmanship well, how can you kill enemies on the battlefield?" Ko Hong, who had clearly seen himself as a part of the enemy, had an unsightly expression on his face. In the end, he could only awkwardly smile and retreat. Then, he sent the same words back to Kwang Yi. At this moment, his expression became even darker. After leaving the shooting range, they went to the army headquarters a few kilometers away. There, they saw a scene that they would never forget. In a meeting room that was thousands of square meters, a huge sand table stood there. On it was a three-dimensional map of the Southern Ming Empire. On the sand table, the rivers, lakes, mountains, roads, cities, and cities of the Southern Ming Empire were displayed one by one. It was as if a three-dimensional map of the Southern Ming Empire was presented in front of everyone. After seeing the sand table, Kwang Yi finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He impulsively strode forward, as if he wanted to flip the sand table over. Two young staff officers had been paying attention to Kwang Yi for a long time. They immediately went forward to stop him and forcefully pushed him to the side. This also caused Ko Hong and the others to become restless. They shouted and went straight to Kwang Yi. However, the commotion had already attracted the attention of the soldiers who were in charge of guarding outside the door. A squad of soldiers rushed out and pointed their guns at Ko Hong and the others. They had no choice but to stop moving forward. The pitch-black muzzles were aimed at the hundreds of people in the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. It was clear that if anyone dared to make a move, they would shoot to death. Ko Hong and the others stood rooted to the ground. Layers of cold sweat appeared on their heads. They didn't doubt that the other party would dare to shoot. After all, this was the Yangtze's army headquarters. It was equivalent to the Southern Ming Empire's Ministry of War. If anyone wanted to cause trouble here, they would have to pay extremely serious consequences. Everyone didn't dare to move. Someone had already reported what happened here. Soon, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Long Song led a group of officers into the war room. He already knew what had happened on the way here. He also found an opportunity to call Yang Qindong to ask for instructions. After receiving an answer, he entered with full confidence. As soon as Long Song entered the war room, Kuang Yi shouted loudly as if he had seen his savior. I protest. I protest that you treat the Southern Ming Empire as an imaginary enemy. You must remove this sand table model and apologize to us immediately. Kuang Yi had met Long Song at the welcome banquet. The two of them even chatted for a while. At that time, Kuang Ye's mentality was still relatively relaxed. He even seemed a little arrogant. On the other hand, Long Song's attitude was very humble. Most of the time, it was Kuang Yi talking while he listened. This created an illusion that Long Song was Kuang Ye's subordinate. How could he have known that Long Song would have such an attitude? It was only because he respected Kuang Yi as a senior. In addition, he also knew that the sixth young master and Sir Kuang had a good personal relationship in the past. That was why he kept enduring. However, this didn't mean that Long Song was really afraid. Especially after he had already called Yang Qindong to ask for instructions, he was even more confident. Chapter 1639. Imaginary Enemy? Kuang Gong, since you said so yourself, why did you do something so inappropriate? As the saying goes, if you don't do anything wrong, don't be afraid of ghosts calling at night. Could it be that you want to be enemies with our 5-star army, so you're afraid that we'll be enemies with you? Let me tell you, your actions have already violated your status as a member of the observer group. You're too reckless, and you'll have to pay the price for it. Men, chase Kuang Gong and all of the South Ming Ministry of War officials out. The Navy has already arranged a transport ship, and they must leave Crimson City today. After saying this in an unquestionable manner, a group of officers immediately began to carry it out. Because not all of the Ministry of War officials and their families were here, they had to search for them. Then, they would be kicked out of Crimson City. Kuang Yi clearly didn't expect that he would end up with such a result after making a ruckus. At this moment, his expression changed greatly, and he shouted, "No, you can't not do this, it's too unfair. I want to see Yang Qindong. I want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. Our king doesn't have time to see you. Also, have you forgotten the bet from before? Let me tell you, there are no civilians in Crimson City who can't afford to eat, because there are countless jobs waiting for them. Therefore, you lost, and with your actions today, there's no other choice but to leave. All right, do it." Long Song didn't have any intention to continue talking with Kuang Yi. After saying this, he turned and left, leaving behind a few officers to deal with this sudden situation. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, Kuang Yi was dragged out of the camp in the end. Ku Hong and the others also followed behind. All of them had ugly expressions. None of them had expected that they would be sent back after only 3 days. How shameful would that be? Everything was because of their minister's impulsive actions. However, they couldn't do anything. The situation was stronger than the person. If they dared to make a move against the 5-star army, it was equivalent to a challenge, and they were seeking their own deaths. No one could save them. They didn't dare to get angry at Kuang Yi. He was their superior, and his words determined their future. Anger that couldn't be vented was the scariest. Until they boarded the ship, no one said a word, but everyone's face was filled with anger, and they were in a bad mood. Especially soon, the family members of the officials from the Ministry of War were also found and sent to the ships. They didn't care so much, especially some of the young people. They were happily strolling around Crimson City. Some of them were even strolling around Young Family's department store, wanting to buy something they liked. Suddenly, many soldiers from the 5-star army rushed out and brought them here. They were still confused about what had happened. Now that they finally knew the truth, how could they not be furious? In their anger, they didn't care about Kuang Ye's status as a high-ranking official. They all started shouting on the ship. Although they didn't directly name Kuang Yi, their words were full of criticism. Do they want to die? When Ka Hong and the others heard this, They were all filled with righteous indignation. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to find trouble with those young people. They couldn't do anything to the five-star army, but they could still take care of their own juniors. Forget it. Let them vent their anger. At this time, Kwang Yi had already calmed down and shook his head. He was already regretting his impulsive actions. But now that things had come to this, there was no other way. Even if he was willing to bend down and apologize, the five-star army wouldn't accept it. Not to mention, it was impossible for him to apologize to the five-star army. Because in Kwang Ye's eyes, Yang Chendong was already a traitor. He was the imperial tutor of the crown prince, the minister of war, and a rank 1 official. How could he lower his head to a traitor? When Kahong and the others heard Kwang Yi say that they could vent their anger, they couldn't help but look at Kwang Yi. Of course, they hoped that this was true. If that was the case, they would each give their own minister of war a punch to vent their anger. But how could they dare to do that? They wanted to go back just like that. They originally had more time to understand the situation of the five-star army, but now everything was gone. A good opportunity to understand their opponent was lost just like that. Everyone's morale was low, and they all leaned against the ship with their heads lowered. It was worth mentioning that this time, the transport ship wasn't the luxurious one from before. It was just an ordinary ship. Yang Xie's explanation was that the incident happened too suddenly, and there wasn't enough time to deploy the ship, so they just had to make do. There wasn't even a single room for them to rest in. Everyone was squeezed in the cabin, and after a long time, there were all kinds of smells. It would be strange if they felt good. But what could they do? This was all Kwang Ye's own fault, so he couldn't blame anyone else. The news that Kwang Yi and all the officials and family members of the Ministry of War were sent away quickly spread throughout the observer group. Regardless of whether it was the officials or their family members, they all rushed back to the Yang family hotel as soon as they heard the news. Then, after a few discussions, the ministers began to restrain the people accompanying them, telling them to pay attention to their attitude and actions. This wasn't the Southern Ming dynasty, but Crimson City. They were only a few guests, and if something went wrong, they might even become criminals. For everyone's safety, everyone had to exercise restraint. The family members cooperated, which was rare. No one made a fuss. They could tell that living in Crimson City was like living in heaven. Who would want to ruin such a good life? Therefore, as soon as the officials spoke, the family members expressed that they would do their best to cooperate. There were even some who spoke ill of Kwang Yi, thinking that he had embarrassed the Southern Ming dynasty. There were quite a few people with such opinions and attitudes. She really didn't know what Kwang Yi would think if he were to hear these words. Wang Zhiqing and Wang Shang also returned to the Yang family hotel. They didn't pay much attention to the fact that the Ministry of War was kicked out of Crimson City. They just needed to control their words and actions. Of course, the reason why they didn't pay attention to it was because the siblings were arguing about what to buy. This matter completely attracted the attention of the two people. The younger sister, Wang Shang, thought that buying a bicycle with Yang coins was already very good. For this, she was willing to give up the latest cosmetics and the exquisite little mirror. She only wanted a bicycle to bring back to the Southern Ming dynasty. She would be able to ride it every day, and her other sisters would definitely be envious of her. Wang Zhiqing had a different opinion on this matter. He thought that if they were going to buy something, they should buy the best one. He was interested in a bicycle that could move on its own without any manual labor. This was a heaven-defying existence. Bringing it back to the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty would be an extremely awe-inspiring thing. Brother, that won't do. Let's not talk about the fact that a bicycle costs 3,000 Yang coins. We simply can't afford it. Even if the Southern Ming dynasty doesn't have electricity, how many times can we ride it back? Wang Shang saw that Wang Zhiqing had already sunk into his own fantasy world and couldn't extricate himself, so she could only pour a bucket of cold water over him. Wang Zhiqing suddenly reacted as if he had been struck by lightning. He stood there motionless for a long time. Wang Shang was scared out of her wits. She walked over and waved her hand in front of her brother's eyes. When she saw that he was unmoved, she used her slender hands to gently push her brother's body. Only then did he let out a long sigh. Aya, why doesn't the Southern Ming dynasty have electricity? Isn't our great Ming dynasty the most outstanding nation in the world? Isn't it said that we have the best environment and the strongest culture? But why isn't there even electricity? What's the point of talking about being advanced and powerful? At this moment, Wang Zhiqing started to ramble. He didn't care if anyone answered his questions. He only cared about throwing out questions one after another. Wang Shang, who was standing at the side, was very clear-headed. She also sighed. Yes, before she came to Crimson City, she still felt that the southern Ming dynasty was very powerful. No matter how strong the Bugnam of Gojoseon and the five-star army were, they still wouldn't be a match for the southern Ming dynasty. But now, her mentality had long been shaken. In Wang Shang's eyes, Crimson City was heaven on earth. Compared to it, the capital of the southern Ming dynasty was a backwater and poor place. She couldn't help but yearn for life in Crimson City. She was already fantasizing about whether she could stay here. If that was the case, how great would that be? Wang Shang and Wang Zhiqing weren't the only ones whose mentality had changed. Many others had similar thoughts. And this was only the third day since they came to Crimson City. To be precise, it was only the second day after they truly understood Crimson City. Kuang Ye's incident reminded everyone. In the following days, the observation team members were much more well-behaved when they walked around Crimson City. After all, with such good conditions, no one was willing to leave immediately. Thus, they couldn't do anything stupid. Kuang Yi and the others didn't even understand the deployment of the five-star army's forces. They also didn't know how many soldiers the five-star army had before they were chased away. But who could be blamed for this? As the saying goes, the evils brought on by oneself are the hardest to bear. With this as an example, the Southern Ming observation team became even more well-behaved. They didn't do anything that crossed the line. But even so, the scenes they saw made them widen their eyes in disbelief. The scenes made them feel as if they were in a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the neat streets, the lush green trees, the rosy-cheeked people, and the high-spirited new army were all things that he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 1640. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Children didn't care about their birth. As long as one of their parents was Han, they could receive a good education from a young age. When people fell ill, they had money to treat them. The greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. One day, they had 3 meals instead of 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal. Everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans dreamed of in the immortal world. But now, everything was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install. But here, it was extremely common. There were also towel factories, flour factories, soy sauce factories, monosodium glutamate factories, mosquito-repellent incense factories, textile factories, cigarette factories, pharmaceutical factories, paper factories, ceramics factories, steel factories, power plants, bullet factories, chemical factories, power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, glass factories, and so on. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. He really didn't know that the world could be so beautiful until he arrived in Crimson City. The Southern Ming Empire's observation team was still in Crimson City. Everything that happened here overturned their previous understanding. In the capital of Southern Ming, Kuang Yi had already returned with the officials of the Ministry of War and close to 2,000 people. As soon as he entered the city, a eunuch came to pass a decree that the emperor wanted to see Kuang Yi. After tidying up his clothes, the travel-worn Kuang Yi entered the imperial palace and knelt in front of Zhu Qizhen. The Great Ming Empire was very empathetic towards its officials. They didn't have to kneel when they saw the emperor. But this time, Kuang Yi felt that he had done something wrong. This kneel represented his intention to ask for forgiveness. Grand Tutor, why are you here? Please rise. Zhu Qizhen was an emperor who knew how to act. At this moment, the concern he expressed made Kuang Yi feel very moved. This time, he wanted to kneel even more and not get up. Your Majesty, this subject is incompetent and has failed to live up to your trust. I was thrown out by that bastard Wu Ninwang. Abruptly, he kowtowed to the ground, and his forehead came into close contact with the ground. Quickly help the Grand Tutor up. When Zhu Qizhen saw that Kuang Ye's forehead was starting to redden, he hurriedly shouted. Soon after, the head eunuch, Qian Sangbao, stepped forward and helped Kuang Yi up. Kuang Yi stood up with tears in his eyes. No one knew how much pressure he had endured on the way back. Almost everyone was blaming him. In the beginning, Ko Hong and the others would still speak up for him, but later on, these people were too lazy to speak up for him, so everyone vented their anger on him. If it weren't for the fact that the embroidered uniform guards were with him, he might have been thrown off the boat and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. His actions made his opponent, Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chendong, unhappy, but he accepted it. But now, even his own people didn't like him. This was really intolerable to him, causing him to have thoughts of suicide. Now that he finally saw Zhu Qizhen, the only person who still believed in him, he cried like a child. Although the embroidered uniform guards had already sent back a message explaining why Kuang Yi came back first, it wasn't very detailed. Now that the real person was in front of him, Zhu Qizhen naturally had to ask clearly. He said, "Someone, give the Grand Tutor a seat." After slowly sitting down, Kuang Ye's mood gradually calmed down. In the end, under Zhu Qizhen's questioning, he recounted what had happened to him, as well as what had happened to the majority of the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. He especially described Yang Chendong's warm reception in great detail. In the end, Kuang Yi said in a tearful voice, "Your Majesty, that brat Yang Hodong is clearly buying people's hearts. It can be imagined that the officials who went this time might not be bought over by him, but as the saying goes, if you take someone else's hand, you will be blinded. I'm afraid that in the following matters, they will be on Bugnam of Gojoseon's side. We have to guard against them." Zhu Qizhen listened to the details from beginning to end and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Although Kuang Yi wasn't a person who was good at telling stories, from his words, one could still feel that Yang Chendong must have put in a lot of effort to receive the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. In addition, Yang Xie was indeed very powerful now. As the saying goes, a good official chooses a tree to nest in. He didn't dare to guarantee what would happen in the future. Has Crimson City really become so powerful? After thinking about it, Zhu Qizhen still asked with a trace of doubt. Yes, because this official's time was still too short. I'm afraid that I only saw the rough outline. The specifics should be more powerful than this official said. In this matter, although Kuang Yi didn't want to admit it, the truth was the truth. He had no choice but to speak the truth. This is really difficult to handle, Zhu Qizhen said with a difficult expression. Just as Kuang Yi said, the officials in the observation group could have been influenced by Yang Chendong. It wasn't impossible for them to have been bribed. However, without any real evidence, he could not just cut them off and do anything to the members of the observation group. There were 3,000 to 4,000 officials in the observation group, accounting for 1/3 of the officials in the Southern Ming Empire. In terms of influence, because the ranks of the officials weren't low, the lowest was at least a 5th-rank official. Therefore, their influence was even greater. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they influenced more than half of the officials. Without any evidence, it wasn't difficult to imagine the consequences of making a move on them. If this was really the case, before the 5-star army attacked, the Southern Ming Empire would be in chaos. If this was really the case, the result was definitely not something that Zhu Qizhen and the Southern Ming Empire could accept. If they couldn't capture people and couldn't make a move, what should they do next? At this moment, Zhu Qizhen had a headache. Naturally, Kuang Yi didn't have any better ideas. He had to face 3,000 to 4,000 officials. That was a huge group. His fellow countrymen, colleagues in the same department, as well as those who were related to his interests or were related to him by marriage. This group was so powerful that it was possible for them to overthrow the Southern Ming dynasty if they were not careful. Facing such a huge force, even the emperor couldn't do anything. This was because even during the time of Zhu Yuanzhang, the founder of the Ming dynasty, although he killed many officials and corrupt officials, he still didn't dare to make a move against 3,000 to 4,000 officials at once. How about the emperor give a decree and have them come back? Then, send someone to communicate with them and make sure they don't talk nonsense. Then, we'll wait and see what happens. Kuang Yi could only come up with this idea. That's the only way. I'll write the decree in a bit. Before Zhu Qizhen could think of a better idea, he could only say this. Then, As if he had thought of something, he asked, "That's right. Grand Tutor said that he went to the Five-Star Army's headquarters. What did he see? In your opinion, if the Southern Ming Empire and the Five-Star Army go to war, what are our chances of winning?" This was what Zhu Qizhen wanted to know the most. History had always been like this. When political means couldn't solve a problem, only war could decide the outcome. At that time, the winner would be king and the loser would be in the wrong. If the Southern Ming Empire had a higher chance of winning, Zhu Qizhen would have to consider mobilizing troops. This could be considered as striking first to gain the upper hand. When he looked at Kuang Yi with anticipation, he was destined to be disappointed. This was because at this moment, the Minister of War lowered his head and didn't dare to look him in the eye. When it came to military matters, there were probably not many people more qualified to speak than him, the Minister of War. Kuang Ye's understanding and control of the military wasn't something that the other ministers of war could compare to. This could be seen from the fact that he spent half a year in the various guard stations. And it was precisely because of this understanding that Kuang Yi felt immense pressure at this moment. Although he had only spent half a day in the Five-Star Army's headquarters, the impression that it had left on him was too deep. Whether it was the training method, the advanced weapons, or the logistical support, the Southern Ming Army could not compare to them. Over the years, although the Southern Ming Empire had invested in the military every year, it wasn't a high proportion. The Southern Ming Empire had Baiming in the north, the three provincial kings in the west, and Bugnam of Gojoseon in the south. However, almost all of the officials didn't think that anyone would use force against the Southern Ming Empire. Baiming couldn't even protect himself, so if he made a move against the Southern Ming Empire, he wouldn't have enough confidence. Facing the pressure of the Five-Star Army, how could the three provincial kings take the initiative to make trouble for the Southern Ming Empire? That would be equivalent to seeking death. Only the Five-Star Army posed the greatest threat. However, they had always been active outside of the Great Ming Empire's territory and had never taken the initiative to make a move against the Southern Ming Empire. Even in the north, Baiming repeatedly made trouble for Yang Qindong, but they didn't retaliate. At most, they sent Baiming back. Because of this, almost everyone thought that although the Five-Star Army was strong, they didn't have the strength to make a move against the Southern Ming Empire. Since this was the case, the Southern Ming Empire would protect itself first and wouldn't invest too much in the military. In their own words, they would sit back and watch their opponent die. They would wait for their opponent to panic and reveal an opening before attacking. It had to be said that the Southern Ming Empire's imperial court was a strange existence to place their hopes on their opponent. However, this was the general trend. Ever since Zhu Qizhen lost at the Tumf Castle, he was afraid of war. His request for the army was to just defend their territory and didn't have the ambition to expand their territory. Even the emperor was like this, not to mention the ministers below. Without enough military funds, the Southern Ming Empire's army could only muddle through. Because of the embezzlement of some officials, many soldiers who came from military families had problems eating and wearing clothes. Even if they didn't starve to death, they wouldn't be able to survive. Chapter 1641. They hadn't eaten for a long time and didn't have enough nutrition, causing most of the Southern Ming soldiers to look like they were emaciated. In comparison, the logistical support of the soldiers of the Five-Star Army was very good. They could get whatever they needed. All of them were tall and sturdy. In addition, they had reasonable training. Most importantly, Yang Qindong valued them highly. Just comparing them to the army, the difference between the two sides was many levels. Not to mention, in terms of equipment, the Five-Star Army was a pure firearms army. Their firearms could take a person's life from 100 steps away. On the other hand, what about the Southern Ming Army? They were still using the most primitive weapons. Even if they had firearms, their strength would be greatly reduced due to lack of training. How could they be a match for the Five-Star Army? Facing Zhu Qizhen's question, Kuang Yi wanted to tell the truth. However, if he did that, it would make the emperor sad and prove that he was incompetent. Thus, after thinking about it, he politely said, "Emperor, if we really fight, I'm afraid that we only have a 50% chance of winning." 50%? If that's the case, then it's 50%. There's nothing to be afraid of. After all, no one can say that they will definitely win. All right, since it's like this, Grand Tutor, you can go and prepare. As for how much silver you need, I'll give you an order later. Zhu Qizhen didn't know that Kuang Yi was comforting him. He really thought that the southern Ming army was very strong and could fight against the five-star army. After hearing this, Kuang Yi wanted to explain. However, after thinking about it, he didn't say anything. He found that even if he said anything, it would be useless. Instead, it would make the emperor lose confidence. If that was the case, the southern Ming army would be in danger. Moreover, there was no evidence that the five-star army would definitely make a move against them. Just like what the staff officer in the army headquarters of the five-star army said, there, not only the southern Ming Empire, but also the topography of any power would be recorded. Perhaps he was thinking too much? With the spirit of AQ in his heart, Kuang Yi left the palace. He didn't even return home and went straight to the Ministry of War. Since the emperor had already said that he wanted to develop the military, he had to plan it well and get the silver first. Crimson City. Today was Yu Qian's day off, so he personally accompanied Chen Sun, Wang Zhua, Xie Chong, Xiao Xian, Wei Luo, Shang Lu, and the imperial censor of the left to tour the city. Their destination this time was the Tomb of the Kings in the eyes of the citizens of Crimson Nest City. The so-called King's Tomb naturally referred to the place where the kings were buried. It referred to the place where the kings of the various countries who were defeated by the five-star army were placed under house arrest. This was a street near the East City. Looking from afar, one could see that each courtyard was quite large, and there was a king imprisoned in each courtyard. Unlike the other streets, both ends of this street were guarded by five-star army soldiers. After a rough calculation, there were no less than 1,000 people. This didn't include the police and the five-star army soldiers patrolling the streets. According to Yu Qian's introduction, there were 2,000 to 3,000 young family soldiers responsible for the security of this street. With so many soldiers, it was enough to show how much importance the Yang Xie placed on the Tomb of the Kings. It was also thanks to Yu Qian leading the team today. Otherwise, if the South Ming observation group wanted to go alone, they wouldn't be able to enter. City Lord. Seeing Yu Qian lead a group of people over, most of whom were wearing South Ming official robes, a colonel in charge of security here ran over and gave a standard military salute. You've worked hard. How about this? We'll go in and take a look. This is the king's token. Yu Qian smiled modestly and took out a golden token with the word Yang on it. Yes. The colonel walked up and checked the token. After confirming that there was no mistake, he turned around and made a gesture to let them pass. From this, it could be seen that the security here was tight, and even Yu Qian couldn't enter without permission. Seeing this, the left assistant minister of rights Zhou Ziong said with dissatisfaction, "There's no need to be so careful." Facing Zhou Ziong's question, Yu Qian acted like he didn't hear it and continued to walk into the street. Behind him was a group of officials from the Southern Ming Empire's observation group. Not long after entering the street, they saw the first courtyard. Iron bars thicker than fingers replaced the courtyard walls and completely wrapped around the courtyard. The advantage of this was that it could prevent people from escaping, and it could also allow people outside to easily see everything inside, making it easier to monitor. An old man in his 70s was sitting in the courtyard, basking in the sun. When he heard the sound of footsteps and saw Yu Qian leading a group of people outside the courtyard, a trace of guilt flashed across his face, and his face instantly turned red. Even so, he didn't turn around and go back inside. This was because if he didn't say anything or went back without orders, he would be punished according to the Yang Xie law. This punishment wasn't heavy. It was just starvation for 3 days. This old man didn't care at first, but after being starved several times in a row, he finally became obedient. When he saw Yu Qian and the others, although his expression was ugly, he didn't hide inside the house. The old man didn't hide, but Yu Qian had already spoken. "Lily, how are you?" "What? He's the original king of Jiaoji, Lily?" It would have been fine if Yu Qian didn't speak, but once he spoke, it immediately attracted cries of surprise from the South Ming Kingdom's observation group. If they didn't know any of the other kings, they definitely knew who Lily was. Some of the officials had visited Jiaoji more than 10 years ago and had seen King Lily. It was just that after more than 10 years, things had changed, so they didn't immediately recognize him. Now that Yu Qian called out his name, they carefully identified him. Soon after, Xie Chong was the first to cry out. That's right. He is Lily. This official has seen him before, but I didn't expect him to be so old. AI. With Minister Xie Chong saying this, how could the other South Ming officials not believe him? At that moment, each of them carefully sized up the old man, but the thoughts in their hearts had already flown off somewhere. Lily naturally heard the cries of surprise from outside. However, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. In the past, other kings would be locked up on this street from time to time. When they first saw him, they were also surprised. Being surprised once was uncomfortable, but after being surprised many times, it became normal. Lily, who was used to it, didn't have any intention of hiding. Since he had already been recognized, there was no point in hiding. Instead, he took the initiative to walk to the railing and said to Yu Qian, "City Lord Yu, isn't it a little too long for the performance team to only come once a month? This king is really bored staying here. Can you give a reaction and let the performance team perform twice a month?" "Okay, I will report your request to the higher-ups." Yu Qian smiled and agreed, which immediately attracted a wave of gratitude from Lily. The first courtyard was Lily, which attracted the cries of surprise from the South Ming Kingdom's observation group. The second courtyard was the Lansong Kingdom's King Paise. Seeing another king locked up here, everyone deeply understood the true meaning of the king's tomb. At the same time, everyone's cries of surprise weren't as loud. In the next courtyard were King Boromir of the Phnom Penh dynasty, Governor Chinrong of Luzon, King Li Yong of North Korea, and so on. Among them, they also saw the blind duke of the Ross Duchy. However, because they were too far away, the South Ming Kingdom's officials didn't react. More importantly, in the two courtyards of the king's tomb, everyone saw the three provinces' King Zhu Huaiqiu and Shiping's King Mu Bin. Coincidentally, the two of them lived across from each other. Every day, when they basked in the sun, the two of them would sit facing each other. It would be very interesting to have two old enemies meet each other every day and not be able to make a move against each other. When the South Ming Kingdom's observation group walked past their courtyard, both Zhu Huaiqiu and Mu Bin wanted to turn around and enter the house. However, they didn't dare to because they were already told that they had to stay outside the courtyard until the observation group left. Otherwise, they would starve for 3 days. Humans were iron, rice was steel. If they didn't eat a meal, they would panic. The two of them had violated the rules when they first arrived and starved for 3 days. That feeling was really uncomfortable, and they didn't want to experience it again. When the two of them obediently stood there like rare animals in the zoo, all the Southern Ming officials who saw them had a gloomy expression on their faces. It was as if they had eaten rat feces. Their hearts were disgusted, and their expressions were extremely ugly. However, there was nothing they could do. The two of them had been defeated by Bugnam of Gojosian fair and square. They had brought this upon themselves. Other people couldn't interfere, nor did they dare to interfere. After walking for nearly 4 hours, they walked out from the other end of the king's tomb. Everyone's expression was different. Hee, there are still some courtyards that are empty, but it doesn't matter. Bugnam of Gojosian said that they will be full one day. Yu Qian seemed to explain very casually. However, when these words were heard by the South Ming Kingdom's officials, they didn't mean that at all. What did he mean by it will be full one day? Could it be that the South Ming Emperor and Bai Ming Emperor were also going to be locked up? It was unknown who it was that muttered this in a low voice. However, because everyone was thinking about something, the scene was extremely quiet. Thus, this sentence was quickly heard by everyone clearly. At this moment, all the officials' faces were filled with shock. They suddenly discovered that this assumption wasn't impossible. Since Yang Xie could defeat so many powerful enemies, why couldn't she deal with the South Ming Kingdom and Bai Ming Emperor? As a part of it, what should they do next? Where should they go? Chapter 1642. The trip this time had dealt a heavy blow to everyone's spirits, so much so that when the officials returned to the Yang family hotel, their faces were still as cold as ice. Yu Qian didn't care about this. He only knew that he had done what he needed to do. As for the rest, he would leave it to their king to deal with. Yang Qindong also learned about Yu Qian's trip to the king's tomb. After hearing Beta Persei's description of the reactions of the Southern Ming officials, he couldn't help but laugh and said, "Good, the fire has already been set up." Let's see how the fire will burn. The Ming observation group was still in Crimson City. During this period of time, they went to many places, such as the Yang Family School. When these officials saw that the children of the Han people in Crimson City could enter the school for free, they were really shocked. During the Great Ming Dynasty, because the people weren't rich and were exploited by the tyrants, there weren't many people who were literate. Using 1% as a ratio was already a bit exaggerated. Didn't they know that allowing the people to become literate was good for the progress of the people? Of course, they knew, but they still prevented this from happening. This was because they wanted to become a powerful group. They needed to have advantages, and literacy was an advantage. But in Crimson City, this kind of restriction didn't exist. All the children of the common people could enter the school for free. If they learned well, they would be used by the Yangxia and become an official. They might even have great power. This was somewhat out of the expectations of the Southern Ming officials. How could a grassroots person have power? If that was the case, wouldn't it be a mess? But the Yangxia clearly didn't care about this. The advantage of this was that the common people had culture, knowledge, and the ability to distinguish right from wrong. As long as they worked hard, they could become useful to the society, the country, and the people. In this way, although it was a shock to the powerful, it also allowed the Yangxia to have more talents. They wouldn't encounter bottlenecks and various pressures in the process of development. In fact, there weren't any powerful people in the Yangxia. Everyone relied on their own abilities. This was no longer the era of heroes and heroes of the father and son. He had to admit that there were more benefits to doing this. When power no longer belonged to certain people, the intensity of the competition would stimulate everyone to constantly work hard. Otherwise, they would face the danger of being eliminated. When the sounds of studying entered their ears, many of the Southern Ming Empire's officials looked pensive. They had a feeling that if they allowed Yangxia to continue developing, it wouldn't be a problem for them to replace the Southern Ming dynasty. Not only the school, but after walking around the factories, they realized that Yangxia was already so powerful. A complete light industry was developing into a heavy industry. With self-sufficiency, they no longer needed to rely on others and could still live well. This was also why Yangxia was so confident. It could be imagined that as time passed, Yangxia's workshop, lathe, and programming would pull further and further away from the primitive Southern Ming. In the end, the strength of both sides would not be on the same level. In the end, it would be normal for the Southern Ming to become Yangxia's subordinate. The more they understood, the more they felt, and the greater the pressure on them. This trip to Crimson City was like opening a new window, making all the officials in the observer group feel great pressure. Everyone knew that the stronger Yangxia was, the more danger the Southern Ming dynasty would be in. Their status and safety would be more and more uncertain. After all, no one wanted to see a powerful neighboring country appear. As they understood more, the use of the Yang family's department store and the Yang coins were also displayed in front of all the officials. When they were attracted by the dazzling array of items, they realized that the Yang coins in their hands had been taken away by their family members. Some of them had even been used to buy goods. Especially when a few brand new bicycles appeared in front of the Yang family's hotel, these officials were shocked and angry. The horizons of the officials were naturally different from those of their family members. Although the bicycles were novel, they weren't enough to attract them. On the contrary, things like flashlights, sewing machines, watches, and binoculars were more attractive. In the eyes of these officials, flashlights were high-tech products. They were very practical. Whether it was for civilian or military use, they were good things. They hoped to learn from, understand, and imitate them. Needless to say, sewing machines could increase the production of the textile industry and clothes. It was undoubtedly a great contribution to the progress of society. Watches could accurately tell the time. It was convenient and also a symbol of status. Binoculars were even more useful when used in the military. Although the binoculars sold in the Yang family's department store were a bit low magnification and were far inferior to those of the five-star army, in the eyes of the country bumpkins, it was already very powerful. There were many ideas, but without the Yang coins, everything was useless. It was just that the family members had already spent all of it. Everything could no longer be recovered. Then another problem appeared. How could they obtain the Yang coins? After asking around, they found out that only officials had the opportunity to obtain yang coins. They would be given a certain amount of yang coins in their monthly salary. Yang coins couldn't be bought with silver. It was one of the most valuable currencies. Using the opportunity to inquire about the yang coins, the salary system of Yangxia officials appeared in front of the Southern Ming officials. As they understood more, they couldn't help but sigh. As a Yangxia official, the salary was really high. Some people even calculated carefully. As a Yangxia official, their salary was actually 50 times that of a Southern Ming official. Although the Yangxia was very strict with the corruption of officials, there was basically no gray income. However, if one could live a good life just by relying on their salary, who would be willing to stretch their hands everywhere, cause countless troubles, and be impeached all the time? Through the yang coins, everyone had a better understanding of the Yangxia official salary system. This was the main reason why Yang Qindong gave them the yang coins. As for some of the goods being bought by the Yangxia, Bugnam of Gojoseon didn't care. After all, it wouldn't be long before the Southern Ming Empire became a part of the Yangxia. So what if those things were passed on? Not only did the officials understand the origin and use of the yang coins, but the family members also had a deeper understanding. Some people couldn't help but sigh. If I could become a Yangxia official, it would be a very happy thing. It was just a sigh. However, when the officials heard this sigh, they would be lying if they said that they weren't moved at all. Many people even started to consider whether it was possible to become a Yangxia official from the Southern Ming Empire. It was also at this time that Yu Qian and Shun Yu received Yang Qindong's instructions and unintentionally mentioned the 9 cabinet elders during the banquet. They specifically mentioned that there were only 5 cabinet elders. The remaining 4 spots were reserved for Southern Ming and Beiming officials. These people might be a bit bureaucratic, but it was undeniable that they had a lot of experience as an official. This was something that the new Yangxia officials couldn't compare to. When faced with a problem, experienced officials would often have a very gentle way to solve it. This was something that could be learned and used as a reference. The cabinet elder's empty spot was right there. They couldn't help but think about it. All of a sudden, a few officials became excited. However, they had been officials for many years and had seen and heard too many things. On the surface, they didn't show any abnormalities. However, once this kind of impatience appeared in their hearts, they couldn't suppress it. At this point, the various thoughts and opinions that needed to be forced onto the observer group were basically completed. At this time, the Southern Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen sent someone to deliver a decree to the Yang family hotel. It was to summon the observer group back to the Southern Ming Empire. Once the decree was issued, although there was still a month before the observer group was allowed to stay in Crimson City for 2 months, everyone had to go back. No matter how much they loved Crimson City, they were still officials of the Southern Ming Empire. Yang Qindong naturally knew about Emperor Ying's decree. Looks like someone can't hold it in. After laughing, Yang Qindong looked at Yu Qian and Shun Yu, who came to report. The 2 of you will be busy for a while. It is our wish to serve the king. Yu Qian and Shun Yu stood up and bowed. After the decree was issued, the observer group was only given 3 days to prepare. Some of the family members were naturally a bit noisy. Clearly, they hadn't played enough. Or rather, there were still many places in Crimson City that they hadn't been to. They couldn't help but complain that the emperor was a bit unreasonable. As such, the officials were all trying their best to persuade them. At this time, Yu Qian and Shun Yu appeared in the Yang family hotel. Then, the observer group officials were called away by them. They said it was to send them off, but everyone knew that there must be something to talk about. Not only were the ordinary officials of the observation group called away, but even high-ranking officials like Chun Sun and Wang Zuo were also invited to the palace by the Black Knights. Seeing the Black Cavalry eyeing them covetously, they were really worried that if they dared to refuse, what kind of serious consequences would there be? Just like that, 3 whole days passed. Not only did Yang Qindong, Yu Qian, and Shun Yu act, but even the other 3 elders, Wan Shaoqian, Wu Qian, and Long Tainan, appeared in the Yang family hotel and invited the officials to a meal. All of a sudden, almost all of the officials who had reached the 4th rank and above were invited to the banquet. As for the content of the conversation, it was up to each person to decide. In reality, What Yang Qindong and the others talked about with the Southern Ming Empire officials wasn't a big matter. Sometimes, it was just a small talk. For some officials, they didn't even make a wish to become an official. But was what they talked about that important? Chapter 1643. What was important was that they had talked about it. As long as the officials were talked about, they would be suspected when they returned to the Southern Ming dynasty. It would be even more difficult for them to be put in an important position. How could Chun Sun and Wang Zhuo not see the reason behind this? However, they had no other choice. In the territory of Qiqian City, they did not dare to go against Yang Qindong's good intentions. Moreover, they also needed to find a way out for themselves. Although being able to go to the meeting did not mean that they would definitely join the Yangxie, at least they would not offend Bugnam of Gojoseon. Moreover, so many officials did not refuse, so why would they refuse? Wasn't this the same as digging their own graves? No one with political wisdom would do such a foolish thing. In the same small courtyard, Yang Lu was listening to Yang Ying's report. He was talking about the officials of the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group being talked about. Master, as of now, all the officials of rank 4 and above in the observation group have been talked about. Yang Qindong has used almost all the officials of the City Lord's mansion and has already started to talk about the rank 5 officials. When Yang Ying said this, his face revealed an expression of admiration. At this moment, Yang Lu's face was also filled with admiration. He naturally saw through Yang Qindong's intentions. It was because of this that he could not help but say with admiration, "Amazing! My young master really has good methods." Presumably, Emperor Ingzong will have a headache and will not dare to put these people in important positions. This is equivalent to cutting off one of his own arms before the battle. Yang Ying also nodded and said, "That's right. If they don't dare to trust these people, then in a certain period of time, Ingzong will have no one to use. It is very likely that there will be internal chaos in the Southern Ming dynasty." "No, it is not a possibility, but a certainty," Yang Lu said with a very firm tone. Then, his tone changed. "However, this has nothing to do with us. It is even a good thing. What we want is to take the chestnuts out of the chaos." "Right. How are the arrangements on Yang Yang's side?" "Everything is arranged properly. The poor and stupid him does not know that he is being used by us." Speaking of this matter, Yang Ying's face was filled with pride. This time, there were embroidered uniform guards among the members of the Southern Ming Observation Group. This was one of the methods the great Ming Emperor used to monitor his subjects. One of the commanders named Wenjing had another mission, which was to contact Yang Yang and create a false impression that Chao Jixiang wanted to join Bugnam of Gojoseon to lure him in. Hearing Yang Ying say that the plan was going well, Yang Lu's expression became better. "Good, haha. If that's the case, we have to be prepared. Remember, this time, we can only succeed and not fail. Otherwise, we will die without a burial ground." Yang Ying replied with a straight face, "Master, please rest assured. We have prepared for this for a long time. There will definitely be no problems." "All right, let's wait and see," Yang Lu said with a face full of excitement. Then, he muttered to himself in a voice that no one else could hear, "I hope you can cooperate. Like this, as a master and servant, I can still spare your life. Otherwise, I can only force you to be ruthless." Crimson City Pier. This day was very lively. The 13,000 people of the Southern Ming Observation Group were queuing up to board the ship. Compared to the excitement they had when they came, most of them were reluctant to leave. They could eat well, sleep well, and have so many fun things here. It was really hard for them to give up. Now that they were finally going to leave, they were going to return to their previous lives. For a moment, a sense of disappointment filled everyone's hearts. Yu Qian, Shun Yu, and the others also appeared in front of the pier to send everyone off. They were bidding farewell to Chen Sun, Wang Zhuo, and the others in front of the pier. With a bitter smile on his face, Chen Sun looked at Yu Qian in front of him and didn't know what to say. Thousands of words turned into one sentence. "Yu Qian, you've really screwed this old man over." "Master Chun, don't say that. Can't you see that our Yangxie is already much stronger than the Southern Ming Empire? This is because our king is virtuous. Otherwise, it would be like dealing with other foreign races and other countries. As long as the army moved, would the southern Ming Empire be able to stop it? Yu Qian didn't feel that it was too much. Instead, he spoke the truth. During this time, Chun Sun also went to the five-star army's barracks. He looked at the equipment and the training process. He also saw the long line of young people signing up. Chun Sun was very envious that so many people in Crimson City volunteered to join the army. It was unlike the southern Ming Empire, where the army relied on soldiers. When there weren't enough soldiers, they could only go to the various cities to recruit strong men. One was voluntary, the other was forced. The result was obvious. The conclusion was that the southern Ming Empire was definitely not a match for the five-star army. Thus, Yu Qian's words were true. However, if Chun Sun joined the Yangtze because of this, he wouldn't be able to get over it. He decided to think about it carefully. He didn't reply to Yu Qian's words and only smiled. On the other side, Xinyu was chatting with Wang Zhua and the others. On the surface, it looked like they were enjoying themselves. Come over when you have time. As long as you are willing, the gates of Crimson City are always open for everyone, Xinyu said with a smile. Wang Zhua and the others naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to immediately nod and agree to this obvious solicitation. They could only chuckle and change the topic. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. Just as everyone was waiting to board the ship, a group of majestic cavalry came from not far from the dock. Then, Yang Chendong, who was wearing a golden cape, came from afar under the protection of the Black Knight Dragon Guards. King is here. Yu Qian and Xinyu immediately straightened their bodies and tidied their clothes before walking over. The other southern Ming officials who hadn't boarded the ship also hurriedly stood in several rows with a respectful appearance. Soon, the cavalry arrived at the pier, and Yu Qian took the initiative to say, "King, didn't you say you weren't coming? How could that be? They are the backbone of our Han people. If they want to leave, how can this king not send them off?" Yang Chendong said as he dismounted. Then, accompanied by Yu Qian, Xinyu, and the others, he walked over to the group of southern Ming officials and shook hands with them one by one. During this period of time, everyone was used to this way of greeting and shaking hands, so everyone was very cooperative. There were even some officials who, after shaking hands with Yang Chendong, had their faces flushed red. Needless to say, this was caused by excitement and excitement. While shaking hands with everyone, Yang Chendong said loudly, "I believe everyone has seen how happy the Han people are living under the leadership of Yang Xie. And we live in this era. Since we have the conditions, what we should do is to let more Han people live a better life. This can't be done by just relying on the efforts of this king and Yang Xie's officials. We still need everyone's support." Well said, well said. The southern Ming officials nodded in agreement. Using the people's livelihood as an example was indeed something that no one could refute. Seeing that the effect was achieved, Yang Chendong smiled and watched as everyone boarded the ships. Ships appeared one by one and left one by one, slowly sailing out of Crimson City's new pier. On the cruise ship, many members of the observer group were still waving their hands towards the shore, looking reluctant to part with them. Wang Zhiqing and his sister Wang Shang also waved for a while. When they saw that the pier was far away, they casually found a place to rest in the ship's cabin. Then, Wang Shang's pleasant voice sounded, "Crimson City is so good. It's 10,000 times better than our capital. I really don't know when we will be able to come back." After sighing, Wang Shang said to herself, "Brother, if grandfather comes to Yangtze to be an official, do you think we can live here forever?" HM? Wang Zhiqing, who was called by his sister, nodded perfunctorily. That's right. At this moment, he didn't hear what his sister said at all. All of his attention was on the ship's cabin. In the end, he still won. He borrowed some money from his friends and sister to buy a bicycle and left it there. This was his biggest gain from this trip. He even began to imagine what kind of commotion he would attract when he rode a bicycle through the streets of the capital, and how many envious gazes would look at him. One of the siblings was talking, while the other was thinking about something. They didn't notice that not far from them, two embroidered uniform guards had already secretly recorded everything they said and how they behaved. It was written that Wang Shang had an incomparable love for Crimson City and wanted to persuade her grandfather, Wang Zhua, to be an official in Yangtze. Her brother Wang Zhiqing was also thinking about the feasibility of this and nodded thoughtfully. Strictly speaking, the contents of the records didn't match up, because Wang Zhiqing didn't hear what his sister said at all. However, this wasn't important. What was important was what Emperor Ying would think when he saw these records, what kind of measures he would take, and what kind of commotion Wang Zhua and the entire Wang family would face. In front of the pier, the last ship had already left. Yang Chenong sighed and said, "Our actions this time will definitely make Emperor Ying unhappy. I'm afraid these officials will be in danger. How about this? You guys immediately come up with a plan. If there's danger, how to save them. When the time comes, the intelligence department will fully cooperate with you." Yu Qian and Shen Yu, who were called out, also knew that this matter was of great importance. They immediately nodded and said, "Yes, Wang. We'll go back and come up with a plan." "Yes, you must do your best to perfect it. Don't be afraid of spending money. Many of these people have real talent. If they can join Yang Xie, it will be extremely beneficial for us to manage the entire Southern Ming dynasty in the future." "Yes, we're clear." Yu Qian and Shen Yu gave their assurances again. Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction and then left the pier with the black cavalry. Chapter 1644. Speaking of the boat, because they had received Emperor Ying's decree, their return speed was clearly faster. They had used close to 15 days to arrive and less than 10 days to return. They had arrived at the docks of the Suzhou prefecture. Once everyone was ashore, they immediately rushed to Yingtian Mansion, the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty, Nanjing Mansion. The officials were all smart people. Since they had returned to the Southern Ming dynasty, regardless of what had happened to their mentality, what they needed to do now was see the emperor and then express their loyalty. Wang Zhiqing, Wang Shang, and the others also got off the boat. However, for some reason, they felt that the air they breathed was not as fresh as before. It was to the point that everywhere they looked was not pleasing to the eye. The formerly bustling capital was now like a countryside in their eyes. There were flaws everywhere. In particular, when they entered the capital and saw the occasional rice fields on the sides of the streets, they felt a wave of disgust and discomfort. In comparison, the incomparably clean streets in Crimson City, as well as the public toilets 1,000 meters away, seemed more humane. Zhu Qizhen met the members of the observer group one by one in the imperial palace. When he saw that everyone was extremely respectful when they saw him, for some reason, he did not feel as interested as before. He had a feeling that these people's smiles were too fake, as if they were acting with him. After the officials finished greeting each one of them, Zhu Qizhen finally spoke. "Beloved officials, I presume that you have all gained a lot from this trip to Crimson City. Since this is the case, go back and write a memorial to see if there is anything we can learn or imitate. Then, we can also make changes, okay?" "Your Majesty is wise. This official will obey," the officials replied in unison. Then, everyone left the imperial palace and returned home to write memorials. The next morning, in front of Zhu Qizhen's dragon table, there were memorials written by the various officials. Zhu Qizhen looked through them curiously. However, not long after, he angrily threw these memorials to the ground. It had to be said that these memorials talked about many things. For example, the Ministry of Personnel's memorial said that they were going to clean up the officials again. Anyone who was found to be corrupt would be heavily punished. For the sake of governance, officials were not allowed to engage in business. Anyone who took over extra land should also be returned. Anyone who had business in their family should also immediately stop to prevent collusion between officials and business. The Ministry of Revenue reported that they were going to reinstitute the business tax and collect heavy taxes. Regardless of whether one was a grand scholar, high scholar, or elementary scholar, they would still have to pay taxes when doing business. Everyone was equal. Only then would the wealth of the country be abundant. Only then would they be able to do what they wanted to do and benefit the people. The Ministry of Rights Memorial said that they wanted to set up a Naming newspaper to allow the common people to have a voice. This way, they could eliminate the existence of any undesirable things to the greatest extent. He also wanted to set up public schools, with the imperial court providing money so that the commoners could have books to study and develop their wisdom. The Ministry of Justice's memorial said that they wanted to expand the dungeon and severely crack down on the outlaws among the people, especially those officials with backgrounds, so that everyone would be equal. Only by giving the common people peace and order would the common people feel safe and happy. Only then would the common people truly support the Southern Ming dynasty. The Ministry of Works said that they wanted to open more factories. At the same time, they wanted to raise the social status of blacksmiths, carpenters, and craftsmen. Only then would they be able to better display their enthusiasm and build the Southern Ming dynasty. Even the imperial censor of the left, Shanglu, wrote a memorial saying that they wanted to clean up the governance of officials and reduce unnecessary expenses for the imperial court. For example, they wanted to reduce the expenses of the embroidered uniform guard, expand the area of the streets, build more public toilets, and let the common people develop the good habit of not urinating and defecating everywhere. They wanted to change the environment of the entire Southern Ming dynasty so that everyone would not have to live in a stinky environment. They could also reduce the occurrence of diseases and so on. Looking at these memorials, if they were not asking for money, they were asking for people, or they were criticizing the Southern Ming dynasty's system and bad habits. How could Zhu Qizhan not be angry? It was rare for him to throw a tantrum in the main hall for several hours. His shouts could be heard from time to time from the throne room, setting up a business tax and taking back the privileges of scholars. What does Chan Sun and the Ministry of Appointments want to do? Do they want us to become enemies with all the scholars in the world and cause chaos without a war? Set up a newspaper when school starts? What does the Ministry of Rights want to do? Could it be that if we don't set up a newspaper, we won't be able to hear the voices of the common people? Expand the dungeon? What does the Ministry of Justice want to do? Do we have so many bad people in the Southern Ming dynasty? What bright heaven and earth! Could it be that the skies of the Southern Ming dynasty are dark and gloomy? The Ministry of Works is even more ridiculous. Raising the status of the craftsmen. Are they trying to change the current state of the Southern Ming dynasty? Won't this cause chaos? If the status of the craftsmen is raised, will the status of other people be raised as well? Especially this imperial censor. According to what he said, are we living in a stinky environment every day? The common people will get sick when they eat grains. This is originally a matter of heaven and earth. How can it be that the common people's production has anything to do with our current environment? After calling out the names of the various departments, Zhu Qizhan overturned the dragon case in a fit of anger. The eunuchs at the side were so scared that they trembled in fear, not daring to say a word. Are they rebelling? All of them are pointing fingers at me. I think they have clearly been bribed by Yang Qindong. We don't believe that Crimson City is really as good as they say. How is this observing and learning? This is clearly eating other people's food and then coming back to bite their master. These people all deserve to be killed. They deserve to be killed. Zhu Qizhan couldn't be blamed for being so angry. He had his subordinates give their opinions because he wanted to see if they had any gains. If there was, he could make appropriate changes without putting in too much effort. But now, how was this appropriate change? It was clearly overturning everything. The Southern Ming dynasty was also degraded by everyone. As the emperor, he naturally had no face. It would be strange if he wasn't angry. After venting his anger, Zhu Qizhan stood there panting. The head eunuch Qian Songbao finally found an opportunity and hurriedly knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, don't be too angry. Your health is more important. It's not worth it for these officials. Yes, it's not worth it, Zhu Qizhan said in a fit of pique. Then, he said, go, summon beloved official Chao to see us. The so-called beloved official Chao was the guard of the embroidered uniform guard, Chao Jixiang. The kneeling Qian Songbao naturally didn't get along with him, but this was the emperor's order. He didn't dare to stop him. He hurriedly gave a look to the eunuch at the side. At this moment, Qian Songbao was secretly delighted. He was thinking that the emperor had nowhere to vent his anger. Perhaps Chao Jixiang came at this time to eat melons. Chao Jixiang, who was on duty in the palace, was quickly found. He came to the throne room and knelt down. You all can leave first. Great companion, you can also leave. He glanced at Qian Songbao. Because of the appearance of Yang Qindong, this little butterfly, Zhu Qizhan didn't experience being captured by Yes Hin. Thus, Chao Jixiang didn't appear to save his master. Now, his great companion became Qian Songbao's eunuch. The emperor summoned Qian Songbao and wanted to drive him away. Qian Songbao naturally wasn't happy. But at this moment, He didn't dare to disobey the emperor's order. He could only agree and leave. After he walked out of the throne room, he stood there in deep thought. Recently, every time Zhu Qizhan saw Chao Jixiang, he was always mysterious. Even his great companion was on guard against him. This made him feel a sense of danger. If Chao Jixiang really replaced him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to have a good ending. Internal strife among eunuchs was often the fiercest. Those in power could get whatever they wanted. As for those who were stepped on, it was a fate worse than death. Eunuch Qian, why are you here? Why aren't you serving the emperor? Qian Songbao, who was in deep thought, was surprised when a voice came from behind him. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw the head eunuch of the empress, Mao Mu. Although they were both head eunuchs, one served the empress while the other served the emperor. The difference in status was too great. Oh, so it's eunuch Mao. What's wrong? Are you leaving the palace? Yes, the empress wants to weave cloth. Aren't I going out to choose? Mao Mu said with a fawning expression. In the entire southern Ming eunuch group, although Mao Mu carried the identity of a head eunuch, his real power wasn't even in the top 10. This was all because the empress's temper was very good, and she never cared about matters. The master was weak, so as the eunuch by the master's side, he naturally didn't have much power. But because of this, Mao Mu became a transcendent existence in the entire group of eunuchs. This person did not fight for fame or profit. Because of the empress, not many people were interested in his position. This made it seem that he had a good relationship with all the eunuchs, and they all seemed to be good. In terms of status, Mao Mu was far from them. But Qian Songbao was a very smart person. He definitely wouldn't casually offend people for no reason. So when he saw Mao Mu ask him, he chuckled and explained, "It's like this. The emperor wants to meet Chao Changwei alone, so I came out to get some fresh air." Oh, so it's like that. It's just that Chao Changwei's thoughts are very big. It's not a good thing for such an ambitious person to always be by the emperor's side. After Mao Mu heard this, he first had a shocked expression on his face. Then, he seemed to say this very casually. Just as he finished speaking, Mao Mu quickly covered his mouth with his right hand with an embarrassed expression. Between eunuchs, unless there was a life and death feud, they wouldn't speak ill of each other in front of each other. That was the behavior of a vile person, and it was shameful. Normally, if Mao Mu said this, Qian Songbao would even reprimand him. After all, he was now the head of the group of eunuchs. He had the obligation to maintain the unity of the group of eunuchs, at least on the surface. Chapter 1645. But now that he was angry, Mao Mu's words hit the bottom of his heart. He said with an angry face, "That's right. I thought I was the only one who thought Chao Changwei was ambitious. I didn't expect that Mao Gonggong also thought so. Then I really have to be careful." Haha, Qin Gonggong, you are busy. I still have to go out of the palace. I will talk to Qin Gonggong when I have the chance. Mao Mu didn't say anything this time. Some words were enough to be said once. Saying too much would have the opposite effect. Mao Mu left like this. Along the way, he took the token given by the empress and walked out of the palace with the 6 little eunuchs. Then he walked into the market and looked around. He went to a few shops but didn't buy any suitable cloth. During this process, no one noticed that while he was chatting with someone in a cloth shop, he had spread the news of Zhu Qizhan's rage and summoning Chao Jixiang. In the entire Yangxie, there were no more than 10 people who knew that Mao Mu was Yang Hodong's spy. Among them, there was an intelligence team that was responsible for contacting him. Wang Shan, the head of the telecommunications department, was the one who knew about it. He was the one who reported everything directly to Yang Chendong. Even the head of the security bureau, Yang San, didn't know. Because of this, Mao Mu's safety was guaranteed. Even if Chao Jixiang had joined forces with the Yangxie trader, he still didn't know that Mao Mu was Yangxie's spy. When Mao Mu reported some of the news in the palace, Zhu Qizhan was listening to Chao Jixiang's report with a serious expression. "Your Majesty, the matter is like this. I have already contacted that person. He will lead Bugnam of Gojoseon to the ship. When the time comes, we will choose to take action at sea. At that time, no matter how great his ability is, he won't be able to escape." "In good. That's right. Didn't you say there was a backup plan?" Zhu Qizhan asked with interest. Yes, Your Majesty. I don't know if you still remember Shaohua Province's President Kuroda, who was the Navy General of Shaohua Province. When the Shaohua Province was destroyed by Yang Xie, he had escaped with 100,000 soldiers. Over the years, although his strength has weakened, he still has 50,000 Navy elites in his hands. When the time comes, they will also appear and join us to kill Bugnam of Gojoseon. However, he also made a request. That was, if he wanted to reclaim the entire Shaohua province, he needed the emperor to acknowledge their existence. There is also that Yang Lu. He wants to inherit the throne after Bugnam of Gojoseon's death, but he said that he will definitely obey the emperor's management. Once he stabilizes his position, he is also willing to send troops to attack Ming and help the emperor unify the world. As soon as Chao Jixiang opened his mouth, he laid out all the plans and the requests of the so-called allies. Hearing this, Zhu Qizhan frowned. After hesitating for about half an hour, Zhu Qizhan opened his mouth. We can agree to President Kuroda's request. Originally, we didn't need to pay too much attention to a small island country, but Yang Lu's request. Chao Jixiang was the best at reading people's expressions. When he saw Zhu Qizhan's expression, he guessed something. He immediately said, Emperor, please rest assured. We can agree to his request first. After he stabilizes Yang Xie and helps us deal with Ming, we can find an opportunity to kill him. Yes, that's what I mean. Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance has already caused chaos in the great Ming dynasty for so long. If he dies, there can't be any more chaos. We can't fall for the same thing twice. Zhu Qizhan said with a satisfied expression. Just like that, the two of them, Zhu Qizhan and Chao Jixiang, began to perfect the plan. This conversation lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, Zhu Qizhan ordered someone to bring in the meal and even rewarded Chao Jixiang to eat with him. This made Qin Senbao, who was waiting outside, very envious. At this time, he felt that his position was in danger, but he didn't have any better ideas, because he didn't know what Chao Jixiang was doing next. In the palace of Qin City, the telecommunications director, Wang Shan, brought the telegram sent by Mao Mu to Yang Chenong. After reading the contents of the telegram, Yang Chenong thoughtfully asked, Did you bring the copy of the telegram from Director Yang San? Yes. Wang Shan also sent the copy of the telegram that he had prepared in advance to Yang Chenong. After staying by Yang Chendong's side for so many years, Wang Shan was also used to the way the young master worked. Therefore, he would send a copy of the telegram that was related to reporting to him. After receiving the telegram from Yang Chendong 2 days ago, Yang Chendong carefully read it again. Then, he put his right hand on the table and tapped it thoughtfully. He seemed to be thinking about something. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, he asked, Did you find anything from the phone that I asked you to monitor? No, that phone is rarely used. Presumably, he also knows that some things are not safe to communicate through the phone. Wang Shan replied in a deep voice, Well, he's grown up. He's so careful when doing things, but unfortunately, he didn't use it properly. Sigh, since he chose this path of no return, he can't blame anyone for everything. Okay, Wang Shan, go back. Remember, don't tell anyone about what happened today, not even Beta Persei. In the entire Yang Xie, Yang Chenong trusted Tiger's Mane the most, followed by a few of his servants, and then Wang Shan. After all, as the head of the telecommunications department, he had access to core secrets. Therefore, although he was only a department head, Wang Shan's position in the entire Yang faction was extremely high. Very few people would not give him face. Wang Shan himself also understood that he could be where he was today all thanks to Yang Chenong. He only needed to do things well, and his status would be stable. He nodded heavily. Young master, please rest assured that no one else will know about this. Wang Shan was able to address Yang Chendong as the young master, just like the servants. This showed how much Wang Shan was valued. Wang Shan took his leave, leaving Yang Chendong alone in the palace study. He sighed. Some things did develop beyond his expectations. He had thought that someone would betray him. After all, when one's status was high and one's vision was broadened, one would have the motivation and ideas to move up. However, when something really happened, and the person who betrayed him was someone he trusted very much, Yang Chendong still felt very uncomfortable. He did not know how long he had been sitting there. All kinds of memories and pasts between Yang Chendong and Yang Lu flashed through his mind. It was not until Hu Yin appeared in the study and brought a bowl of lotus seed soup in front of him that Yang Chendong came back to his senses. He smiled apologetically. "Look, I made you worry again." "No, I just wanted to see you. Don't think too much about it. We've already gotten enough. Even if we stop now, we won't have any regrets." Hu Yin walked behind Yang Chendong with a smile and gently massaged his shoulders. Feeling the care and gentleness, Yang Chendong reached out and patted Hu Yan's arm. "Good. Optimistic spirit. Take it easy, take it easy. Ha ha ha." At this moment, Yang Chendong's mood seemed to be much better. In contrast, Yang Lu outside the small courtyard of the palace was very proud. As he expected, although when Jing had gone back, he had already convinced Yang Yang. If the plan went smoothly, there should be a result soon, and he just needed to push the boat along. "Yang Ying, you can go and do that thing now. This little one understands." Yang Ying nodded in agreement, then turned and left. On the surface, after the southern Ming Kingdom's observation team left, Qiqian City became stable again. But in fact, there was an undercurrent surging, and a conspiracy was shrouding Yang Chendong's head. 2 days later, Yang Yang went straight to the palace. His face was full of joy, as if he had done something great. On the same day, Beta Persei's mother-in-law, Fatima, suddenly entered Yang Xie First Hospital because of a serious illness. As the son-in-law, Beta Persei naturally had to perform well. He had already applied for 10 days of leave from Yang Chendong to serve his mother-in-law. In the palace, Yang Chendong saw Yang Chendong and said, "Fourth brother, it's done. I have already discussed with the commander of the Southern Ming Brocade Guards, Wan Jing. As long as you, Bugnam of Gojoseon, are willing to admit it personally to the other party, and Chao Jixiang is willing to submit to Yang Xie, he will bring all the Brocade Guards. Anyway, at that time, they will control the Southern Ming Palace. As long as my army arrives, we can take over the entire Southern Ming Kingdom with the smallest price." Looking at Yang Chendong's happy expression, Yang Chendong smiled. "Fourth brother, how did you discuss it?" "Oh, it's like this." Yang Chendong explained the plan that they had discussed. After an hour, Yang Chendong understood everything. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Okay, this prince agrees. I will meet with Chao Jixiang outside the Wenzhou port. At that time, this prince will personally promise that as long as Chao Jixiang is willing to help me, Yang Xie, not only will he not be punished, he will also be rewarded greatly." Yang Chendong was very happy when he saw that Yang Chendong had agreed. "That's great. However, fourth brother, you must remember that in order to prevent the news from leaking out, you must not bring too many troops. It will not be good if the news is leaked." Is this fourth brother's idea or their idea?" Yang Chendong asked after hearing this. However, his heart was beating very fast because if this was his fourth brother's idea, then he could not help but suspect whether Yang Yang was also involved. Fortunately, Yang Yang quickly gave the answer. "Of course it is Chao Jixiang's idea. He is afraid that the news will be leaked. When that time comes, Ingzong will be prepared, and he will not be able to complete his mission of controlling the imperial palace. Of course, with fourth brother's current status, even if he cannot bring too many people, he will still be accompanied by the Black Cavalry. After all, one must always be vigilant." Hearing Yang Chendong say this, Yang Chendong was finally able to relax. He nodded and said, "Okay, fourth brother. I understand the matter and I also agree. Next, you all can set a time together. When there is an accurate time, just inform sixth brother." Chapter 1646. "That's the best, huh?" Yang Chendong grinned. Obviously, he wanted to facilitate this matter. This was equivalent to him making a great contribution. At that time, no one would dare to look down on him. Who would say that he was relying on his relationship with fourth brother Yang Chendong? He wanted to prove that he was also a capable person. Yang Chendong agreed. The news quickly reached Yang Lu's ears. In the small courtyard, Yang Ying was so happy that he forgot himself. After all, after so many years of hiding, there was finally a conclusion to this matter. He felt that the burden on his shoulders was a lot lighter. Yang Lu, on the other hand, frowned in joy. Yang Ying, why do you think he agreed so readily? Is there a trap in this? How can that be? Master has been hiding it very well. Besides, this matter was facilitated by Yang Yang. We didn't even show our faces. Even if there is suspicion, it won't fall on us. Master, you have to hurry up. It's best if you can fight to go to the sea with him. This way, our chances of winning will be higher. Yang Ying said without any doubts. That's right. Yang Lu nodded. He felt that Yang Ying's words were very reasonable. He immediately put down the doubts in his heart and said, this problem is not difficult. Right now, only Beta Persei, Yang Wu and I are in Qiqian City. Yang Wu has to guard the palace and keep an eye on the officials in Qiqian City. Beta Persei also has to keep an eye on the hospital. With Yang Qindong's habit of sympathizing with his subordinates, he most likely won't bring him this time. So, other than me, who else is more suitable? After this analysis, Yang Ying also felt that this was the truth. He immediately said, then I have to congratulate Master. I'm afraid that it won't be long before this little one will call Master King. Ha ha ha, well said, well said. Yang Lu thought that the southern Ming emperor had promised him that once Yang Qinong died, he would inherit the position of Bugnam of Gojoseon. He immediately laughed happily. At this moment, Yang Qindong had already agreed to meet Chao Jixiang in private. The meeting at sea seemed fair to everyone, but Yang Qindong knew that there was a great conspiracy behind this seemingly fair meeting. If it was just him alone, he wouldn't be afraid of any conspiracy. It was still the same sentence, with Datsong in hand. As long as they didn't kill him immediately, it would be impossible for them to kill him. But this time, he was not alone. There were many black cavalry following him. He could not leave his brothers to the side. That would be irresponsible. If he did not bring the black cavalry with him, it would definitely arouse suspicion. In this case, it was necessary to make some preparations in advance. So he went to the Navy headquarters. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong had already left with the Navy, and not long ago, he sent a report of victory. In front of the leading ships of this world, whether it was speed or firepower, they were several times stronger than the other side. The expansion of the Navy can be said to be very smooth. With the cooperation of the Navy's Cold Vanguard Division, so far, they haven't encountered any difficult bones. Yang Qinong even knew that even in the future, when the Yangtze Navy enters the Western Europe, there won't be any decent opponents. At this time, the West was far from being as developed as the future. There were even many places that didn't have their own civilization, let alone technology. With this opportunity, Yangtze can really unify the West. Otherwise, once they really start to rise, even if they send several times more troops, it will be difficult to accomplish. It can be said that now is the best time. Yang Qindong came to the Navy headquarters. Of course, he didn't ask about the Navy's overseas expeditions. If there is any news, someone will report it to him. He came here to make some arrangements for the meeting with Chao Jixiang. Although Yang Qindong has already seen that this is a trap, he doesn't know how many people the other side has, how many preparations, and how many people are involved. He didn't even let people inquire about it, fearing that it will alert the enemy. That is, Yang Qindong dared to take such a big risk without knowing anything. I'm afraid that if he said that he is second, no one would dare to say that he is first. This time, he came to the Navy to make the corresponding arrangements. Although he doesn't know the other side's means, he should prepare something that can't be neglected. Now in charge of the work here is the commander of the Navy's Cold Vanguard Division, Nie Tong. He is also one of Yang Xie's old men, and also one of Yang Qindong's trusted Navy generals. In the room of the commander-in-chief of the headquarters, Yang Qindong and Nie Tong sat facing each other. After that gaze constantly scanned Nie Tong's body, Nie Tong's forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Today, with Yang Qindong's power, few people can face him calmly. Perhaps only people like Yu Qian who have a lot of experience can do it. Can I trust you? These words caused Nie Tong to stare blankly for a moment before he abruptly stood up. With an incomparably confident tone, he said, "Sixth young master, this subordinate is at your beck and call. I am willing to serve you at any time." From the results of the investigation of the Intelligence Department, the Navy's department is still very pure. There is a war to fight. There is something to do. There is no time to think about other things. coupled with the investigation of the intelligence department, Nye Tong has won his trust. Very good, Commander Nye. This king asks you, what is the largest speed of the warship in the Navy? The so-called speed refers to the speed of the ship at sea. About 1 knot is equal to nearly 2 kilometers. For example, the speed of the Ming dynasty's ships is about 5 or 6 knots, which is equivalent to about 10 to 12 kilometers per hour. For example, the speed of the later Liaoning warship is 29 knots, which is less than 60 kilometers per hour. Because the Yangtze Navy ships use steam cars, now the maximum speed can reach between 10 to 12 kilometers per hour. Just in terms of speed, it is twice the speed of the opponent. Reporting to the 6th Young Master, the Navy dock has 10 5th-level warships, 34th-level warships, hundreds of 3rd-level warships, and other 2nd-level and 1st-level warships. The 3rd-level and above warships have reached a speed of more than 10 knots. In these years, the Navy's warships have been developed. In the past, only the commander-level commanders can command 5th-level warships. Because of the emergence of 6th-level warships, now it has become the division's exclusive use. And so on, the Navy has become many times stronger than before. Good. Hearing that there are so many powerful ships, Yang Chendong is very satisfied. He decided to use all of the 3rd-level and above warships. Although it seems a bit exaggerated, one of Yang Chendong's rules of conduct has always been to not do anything. Besides, this time there is still a naval battle to fight. No one knows what Yang Chendong and Nye Tong talked about in the end. Everyone only knows that for more than an hour, the door of the room was not opened. In the end, Yang Chendong left with satisfaction. The Navy dock is a first-class military secret location. Without permission, even the Yang family servants have no way to get close. Based on this point, this trump card has become a secret, and there is no need to worry about it being known by others. The only one who really knows the plan is Nye Tong. The other members of the entourage only know that there is a sea mission. As for where they are going and what they are going to do, it will only be revealed at the last moment. After a trip to the Navy headquarters, Yang Chendong returned to the palace and went to the telegraph office. Except for the director Wang Shan, who is still inside, the other staff have been temporarily exiled for various reasons. Even if the servants around him can betray him, Yang Chendong really can't casually trust other people now. After leaving Wang Shan, the two of them operated the telegraph for a while. After doing this, Yang Chendong stretched and said to Wang Shan, this time you stay at home. You don't have to go out with me. No, this subordinate is not talented. I am willing to follow the young master until death. Wang Shan suddenly stood up and said with an unquestionable voice. Although he now has a faint feeling that this sea trip will be very dangerous, he still wants to follow Yang Chendong. Everything he has today is all thanks to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Now that there is danger, how can he shrink back? Okay. Thinking that many things can't be done without Wang Shan's help, Yang Chendong nodded and agreed after a little hesitation. Then he got up and patted Wang Shan on the shoulder and said, if that's the case, you must be careful on this trip. Yes, young master. This subordinate will be careful and won't let you down. After a series of arrangements, the next problem is the follower. Although Beta Persei took the time to come from the hospital to the palace and asked to follow, Yang Chendong still happily refused. Beta Persei, your mother-in-law is sick. Now is the time for you to perform well. Besides, you have followed me many times. This time won't make a difference. Don't go this time. Just let. Yang Chendong's gaze moved between Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were standing on the side, and finally fell on the latter. Let Yang Lu follow the young master.
Yes.
Yang Lu was overjoyed, but his face did not change. Instead, he looked at Beta Persei and promised, second brother, don't worry, I will be fine with the young master. Then, okay. Beta Persei saw that Yang Lu took the initiative to stand up, and this was the young master's idea, so he did not fight for it. After all, they were all servants, and he couldn't be the only one to enjoy the good things. He also needed to give others a chance. After deciding on Yang Lu's follower, Yang Chendong personally appointed the third captain of the Black Cavalry, Badeo Jiang, and asked him to bring 500 Long Wei with him. The matter was settled. Regarding Yang Chendong only bringing 500 Black Cavalry, whether it was Beta Persei, Yang Wu, or Yang Lu, all showed faint doubts. Obviously, the Black Cavalry now had 5,000 people, and only 500 people were too few. Chapter 1647. Quite a lot. Yang Chendong chuckled. The last time we went to Yunnan, we only had 500 Black Cavalry and there were no problems. Not to mention that this time, other than the Black Cavalry, we also have the Cold Vanguard Army. Alright, Yang Lu, go back to the Navy headquarters and look for Commander Nyetong to see who is suitable to accompany us. We don't need too many people, just a battalion of 500 people will do. Yang Lu, who was called out, was very excited and quickly agreed. He did not expect that Yang Chendong would value and trust him so much. At this time, his mentality was shaken. Is it really good for him to go against his master who trusts him so much? Yang Lu did not immediately go to the Navy headquarters. Instead, he first returned to the small courtyard and saw Yang Ying. Master, there is no turning back. Now that your matter has been revealed to the Emperor of the Southern Ming Empire, it is impossible to stop even if you want to. Besides, Yang Chendong has no one by his side right now, so he thought of you. Once the problem with Beta Persei is solved, I'm afraid he will kick you aside. Do you want to endure it again? As the person Chao Jixiang sent to Yang Lu's side, Yang Ying naturally would not allow things to stop halfway. Hearing these words, Yang Lu nodded continuously. He just could not bear it. In fact, he did not have the intention to stop the plan. Otherwise, he would not have discussed it with Yang Ying and would have directly confessed to Yang Chendong. Now that he got the answer he wanted, he nodded vigorously and said, "That's right. This is my opportunity. I must grasp it." In the Navy headquarters, Yang Lu's figure appeared. Commander Nyetong, who had already received the news, was personally accompanying him. Then, a battalion commander called Wang Nanhu was called. No one knew that Wang Nanhu had already been bribed by Yang Lu. This was also an accident. When Yang Lu was still managing the intelligence agency in the Southern Ming Empire, he received news about Wang Nanhu. This person was actually an early spy that the Southern Ming Brocade Guard had sent to Crimson City. However, what was unexpected was that ever since Wang Nanhu entered Crimson City and Cold Front, his attitude changed rapidly. He actually took the initiative to cut off all ties with the Southern Ming Empire and changed his name from Wang Hunan to Wang Nanhu. Even though there was only a difference of one word, it was very difficult for the Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard to find someone. The defensive measures of Crimson City were simply too strict. Who knew how many spies had been sent out over the years, but all of them either went missing or were captured and killed. If Chao Jixiang and Yang Xie hadn't started working together and provided this list, Wang Nanhu might have hidden for the rest of his life and become a real Yang Xie. Wang Nanhu was not the only one on the list. There were many others. However, most of them could no longer be found, or it could be said that they had hidden themselves very well. On the other hand, Wang Nanhu, whose name was reversed, was too easy to recognize, which was why Yang Lu had discovered him. It was because of this that Yang Lu named Wang Nanhu. Nyetong had already received Yang Chendong's secret order to fully cooperate with Yang Lu's actions. Of course, he wouldn't stop him and agreed. After that, Wang Nanhu went to Yang Lu's small courtyard to report. Wang Nanhu didn't know that his identity had been exposed. Over the years, he had even forgotten that he was a spy of the Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard. It was because he had been very happy over the years in Crimson City. This was because he had confirmed the strength of the Yang Xie. He was also certain that only the Yang Xie could truly let the Han people live a luxurious life without worrying about food or clothing. Over the years, Wang Nanhu had also done his best to integrate himself into this life. Because of his efforts, he had now become a battalion commander of the Navy's Cold Front. It could be imagined that his future was bright and promising. When he came to the small courtyard with this thought, he first saw Yang Lu sitting on the chair. He knew that this was one of Bugnam of Gojoseon's most trusted servants. He immediately gave a military salute and said with an excited tone, "The Navy's Cold Front's 1st Army's 1st Division's 3rd Regiment's 2nd Battalion Commander Wang Nanhu has come to report. Leader, please ask for instructions." Your spirit is not bad." Looking at Wang Nanhu, who was standing there like a pine tree, Yang Lu chuckled. This was considered a compliment. Wang Nanhu, who was in his 30s, also laughed embarrassedly. But Yang Lu's next words made him suddenly feel as if he had fallen from heaven to hell. His whole body was covered in a layer of cold sweat. But I don't know, seeing you like this, what will Chao Jixiang's guild think? Yang Lu, who seemed to say this casually, stared at Wang Nanhu without turning his gaze away. Like a thunderclap in his mind, Wang Nanhu suddenly realized that he once had another identity, a secret agent of the Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard. At this moment, the past flashed through his mind like a movie, causing his face to turn red and white. Wang Nanhu was still struggling as his expression kept changing. He was betting that Yang Lu was trying to trick him. Perhaps this was a test before he was given a mission. Therefore, he tried his best to calm himself down. Then, he chuckled and said, "Chief, what are you talking about? This subordinate doesn't understand." Seeing that Wang Nanhu was still struggling, Yang Lu laughed and said, "Is that so?" "That's right. Wang Nanhu can't understand, but Wang Hunan should be able to, right?" Boom. Another thunderclap flashed through his mind. At this moment, Wang Nanhu no longer had any illusions. Even his real name was found out. This was no longer a coincidence. The other party already knew his true identity. Since the other party already knew, Wang Nanhu didn't deny it. Instead, he looked around and thought that there must be soldiers lying in ambush. He should be taken down soon. All right, there's no need to look around. There's no ambush. I'm the only one who knows your current identity. Of course, Yang Lu could tell what Wang Nanhu was thinking. He smiled casually and threw another bomb. "Wang Nanhu, I know that you really want to cut ties with the Southern Ming Empire, so I can give you a chance. Not only will your identity not be known by others, but you can also be a true Yang Xie from now on. No one can talk about your past." "What do you need me to do?" Wang Nanhu's eyes were filled with hope again. "You don't need to know now. When I need you, you just need to do as I say. Don't tell me you still don't trust me." Yang Lu's tone was profound. "All right, then I'll listen to your orders." Wang Nanhu agreed because he knew Yang Lu's identity. He really hoped that his relationship with the Southern Ming Empire could be severed. Now that the opportunity was in front of him, he naturally had to seize it. Very good. Seeing that Wang Nanhu agreed, Beta Persei finally had a smile on his face. "Next, gather your battalion and prepare to follow Bugnam of Gojoseon to carry out missions. Remember, you have to listen to my orders. You only have one chance to perform. If you don't seize it, don't blame others." "Please don't worry, Chief. I will definitely seize the opportunity," Wang Nanhu said without hesitation. In the Imperial Palace of Crimson City, Yang Chendong appointed a commander named Wang Nanhu. When Yang Chendong heard this, he didn't say anything. He didn't even send people to investigate. He wanted to see how Yang Lu, whom he had groomed, was going to deal with him. And just in case, after all, there was no absolute victory or defeat in war. So using the remaining 3 days, Yang Chendong separately found the deputy commander of the army, Long Song, and the commander of the navy, Nye Tong, and announced the establishment of the military committee to them. The military committee, also known as the military committee, was equivalent to the cabinet of the civil officials. The members were initially decided to be 5 people. They were responsible for military affairs. The person directly in charge was himself, and the second in charge was Crown Prince Yangbo. In other words, if something happened to him, or if something urgent happened and he couldn't be contacted, Yangbo would be in charge of military affairs. At that time, even the cabinet had no right to interfere with military affairs. When Yang Chendong took Yang Bo's hand and announced in the army headquarters, the first batch of military committee members were Tiger's Mane, Long Song, Gao Xiong, Tian Yu, and Tian Hu. Deputy Commander Long Song then sent Yang Chendong and his son out of the army headquarters. When the 2 of them arrived at the main street, Yang Bo said thoughtfully, "Father, are you leaving Crimson City again?" "Yes." Yang Chendong didn't intend to hide it from Yang Bo. As his eldest son grew up, there were some things he needed to know. "Father, is it very dangerous this time?" Yang Bo raised his head. His voice was still a little immature as he looked at Yang Chendong and asked again. Yang Chendong didn't expect his son to have such observation and perception at the age of 11. He was very pleased. "Yes, it is a little dangerous, but fortunately, everything is under father's control." "Then I'm relieved." A sincere smile appeared on Yang Bo's face. Looking at Yang Bo's adult-like appearance, Yang Chendong smiled and patted Yang Bo's head. He said, "Bo-er, remember, as a king, you have to trust your subjects, but you also have to be careful. You also need to have your own judgment and not be swayed by others. Because of the difference in status, they might not really think about you. As long as you think it's right, just do it." "Yes, I'll remember." With Yang Bo's comprehension ability, he naturally couldn't understand everything, but this didn't stop him from remembering it and slowly understanding it when he returned. After the cabinet, the military committee was also established. Just like that, Yang Xie's two major institutions began to operate. Yang Chendong could also put down his burden and do what he should do. Chapter 1648. On the morning of the third day, Yang Chendong told Hu Yin and the others that he needed to go out and would be back in a few days. Then, he walked out of the palace with firm steps facing the rising sun. Outside the palace, Ba Daojiang and the 500 black cavalry were already in formation, waiting for orders to set off at any time. According to fourth brother Yang Yang, this meeting with Chao Jixiang was a very secret matter, so they couldn't let more people know about it, in case the news was leaked. So Yang Chendong really didn't tell anyone. Of course, this wasn't because he believed these words, but because he didn't need to let others worry. On the new pier of Crimson City, Yang Yang and Yang Lu were already waiting. Battalion Commander Wang Nanhu was also waiting with 500 cold vanguard soldiers armed with live ammunition. Fourth brother, "Young master, greetings, Wu King Nan." All sorts of greetings followed. Yang Chendong's expression was calm as he looked at Yang Lu and asked, "Is everything ready?" "Young master, everything is ready. We can set off at any time." Yang Lu suppressed the excitement in his heart. "Good, then let's set off." Yang Chendong nodded and walked towards the nearest Class 5 warship. This time, in order to not attract attention, Yang Lu didn't bring a Class 6 warship. Instead, he chose the Class 5 warship in front of him. Soon, the black cavalry boarded one by one. Then, the ropes were retracted and the three warships left the pier. At this time, at the pier, Nie Tong was leading the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd regiments of the 1st Division. Because outsiders were forbidden from approaching the pier, no one knew that they had left. In addition, the 4th Regiment was left behind to guard the pier. From the outside, it didn't look any different from before. On the sea, a total of 3 Class 5 warships were heading towards Fuzhou from Crimson City. At the harbor built by the Yang faction in Fuzhou, Chao Jixiang, dressed in casual clothes, walked into a medium-sized ship. The embroidered uniform guards who had long since taken control of everything on the ship also set sail, heading towards Crimson City. Behind their ship, 2 ships that looked like fishing boats were tailing them. Relying on the high-powered binoculars in his hand, he seemed to be hanging several miles behind them. Because the distance was too far, it did not attract Chao Jixiang's attention. Or rather, Chao Jixiang's attention wasn't on his side at all. Ever since he entered the cabin, he had been looking at the radio in front of him. An intelligence agent sent by Yang Lu was fiddling with it. He knew nothing about radio stations. He only knew that it was very powerful and could transmit information from thousands of miles away. Chao Jixiang, who was sighing at the miraculous nature of this item, was waiting for the fish to take the bait. As for safety, he was not worried. Yang Lu had arranged everything. As for whether or not he would be cheated, he was carrying the imperial edict personally written by Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect. It was about Yang Lu succeeding Yang Chendong and becoming the Bugnam of Gojoseon. Presumably, there were people who were more anxious than him. If Yang Chendong didn't die, Yang Lu wouldn't be able to ascend the throne. Right, Yang Lu now had another name, Yang Shunming. This meant that he was willing to submit to the great Ming dynasty. It could be seen that in order to ascend the throne, Yang Lu was really going all out. As for whether or not Yang Lu would lie to him, it was basically impossible. He wouldn't tell such a big lie just to deal with her, would he? Furthermore, he even asked Yang Chendong to cooperate with him. Did he really think that he had an important identity? Eunuchs, in the end, weren't even considered complete people. They were even looked down upon by many people. Even if some people tried to curry favor with them, It was only because of the emperor's face. If they really left the emperor's favor, eunuchs wouldn't even be worth a fart. Chao Jixiang was waiting for news. Yang Qindong's level 5 warship was also heading towards the predetermined location. The level 5 warship's speed wasn't slow. It braved the wind and waves all the way, quickly approaching the destination. It was only 180 kilometers in a straight line. In the future, it would only take 80 minutes to reach the destination. It was impossible to be so fast now. However, it would only take 10 hours to reach the destination. Not to mention, the destination wasn't Fuzhou, but the sea outside of Fuzhou. Therefore, in just 8 hours, Yang Qindong and the rest arrived at the predetermined sea area. During the journey, Yang Qindong sat in the main cabin and was playing Go with Yang Yang. Ba Daojiang and the rest were watching and learning from the side. It was precisely because Yang Qindong loved Go that the few servants around him were not bad at Go. Even Beta Persei, that big brute, was quite accomplished in Go. There was no need to talk about Yang Lu. He had more time than Beta Persei and studied Go more deeply. At this moment, he was watching the game from the side. Yang Qindong's Go skills were also not bad. After coming to the southern Ming dynasty, he had looked for others to specially learn from him. However, when facing Yang Qindong, he still felt a lot of pressure. After all, after having Datsong, Yang Qindong had already changed. He learned everything quickly and was more proficient in it. Compared to the game of Go in the main cabin, outside the cabin, Yang Ying was talking to Battalion Commander Wang Nanhu. Battalion Commander Wang, we are about to reach our destination. In a while, everything will be done according to my instructions, understand? Yes. Yang Lu had already introduced Yang Ying to Wang Nanhu and told him to listen to this person's orders. Therefore, at this moment, Battalion Commander Wang did not know what was going to happen next. He also did not know that he was now helping someone to deal with Bugnam of Gojoseon. All right, bring your men to the bow of the ship to check. Leave the safety of this place to our men, Yang Ying said casually.
Yes.
Wang Nanhu replied again and turned around to take away the 33 soldiers guarding here. It was a full platoon of cold front soldiers. When he came, he knew that Yang Lu had arranged for other people to board the ship to take care of Bugnam of Gojoseon's safety. He also saw that they were wearing the Navy's cold front uniform. Because everything was arranged by Yang Lu, he did not ask any questions. There is a military rule in Yang Xie's army, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. But Wang Nanhu did not know that these 33 cold front soldiers were not sent to protect Bugnam of Gojoseon, but to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon. They have been missing for a long time, and even Yang Xie's intelligence department could not find them. Among the 33 people, the leader was Kitamura and Yui Suzuki, followed by a group of Jonin and Chunin. In order to prevent being discovered by others, they deliberately put something in their shoes to make them look as tall as Han people. What happened outside, the Black Cavalry did not know. Because not long after they boarded the ship, Yang Qindong strictly ordered the Black Cavalry to stay in the main cabin with him. This order was given in front of Yang Lu, and he also explained that the cold front soldiers should also be trained. So far, the 30 Black Cavalry soldiers on the main ship did not go out, which made it convenient for Yang Ying to do all the things outside. Yang Lu intentionally stayed in the main cabin to calm Yang Qindong's heart. He didn't make any small movements and was also monitoring the words and actions of the other Black Knight Dragon Guards. A total of 3 battleships came, but most of the Black Cavalry soldiers and Cold Front soldiers were arranged in the other 2 battleships. Now there are only 30 Black Cavalry soldiers and a platoon of 33 Cold Front soldiers, led by Commander Wang Nanhu on the main ship. In contrast, Yang Lu arranged a total of 100 ninjas on the main ship. Just in terms of numbers, Yang Lu already has the advantage. The cautious Yang Lu did not act immediately. He knew the strength of the Black Cavalry, and the Cold Front soldiers were just temporarily kept in the dark. Once they know what happened, they will immediately become his opponents. Without full confidence, he will not act immediately. Yang Qindong seemed to be completely unaware of what was happening outside. He was still playing Go with his 4th brother, Yang Yang. In the end, he won 3 games. This is already giving a lot of face to his 4th brother. Yang Yang also knew what was going on. He couldn't help but laugh. 6th brother, your 4th brother is not your opponent. You are still the best. Haha, 4th brother, You're too modest. If you weren't so impatient, we might have won this game. Yang Chendong seemed to be talking about the chessboard, but it also seemed like he was pointing out something in a roundabout way. When these words fell into Yang Chendong's ears, he didn't know why, but his face tightened. He always felt that Yang Chendong's words were pointing at something. Fortunately, at this time, Yang Ying walked into the main cabin and said, "Your Majesty, Xiao Jixiang's ship has arrived." "Oh, he's here? Haha, that's great." Yang Yang got up very happily. For him, being able to instigate the defection of such an important person like Xiao Jixiang was naturally a great achievement. He could finally use practical actions to get rid of his status as Yang Chendong's fourth brother. For him to be where he was today, he also had real ability. "Yang Lu Badeojiang, you go out and take a look." Yang Chendong didn't get up. With his current status, perhaps if Zhu Qizhen came, he would only go out and welcome him. After all, it was just a eunuch. It was really nothing. Yang Lu and Badeojiang nodded in unison, then went out of the main cabin with Yang Yang. As expected, they saw a small boat sailing over. In the distance, Xiao Jixiang, who was wearing clothes embroidered with fierce dragons, appeared in front of them under the protection of more than 10 imperial guards with embroidered spring sabers at their waists. That's right, it is Master Qiao. When he saw the person, Yang Yang's smile grew wider. Although Badeojiang had never seen the real person, he had seen many portraits in the past. In addition, Yang Yang had verified the identity of the other party, so of course he didn't suspect anything. He nodded, then turned to enter the cabin and said, "Sixth young master, it is Xiao Jixiang. Let's go on board to discuss." Yang Chenong nodded. His expression didn't change at all. But if one looked carefully, one would be able to see that he seemed to have sighed softly, but no one knew what it was. That was a pity. Chapter 1649. A spiral staircase was set up on the ship to guide Xiao Jixiang and the others onto the ship. The moment their bodies crossed, Xiao Jixiang's gaze landed on Yang Lu. When he saw Yang Lu nod casually, a smile appeared on his face, and he seemed to straighten his back even more. With a total of 12 embroidered uniform guards, Xiao Jixiang boarded the Yang family's 5th-grade warship under the protection of Wan Jing's command. Before entering the main cabin, he was stopped by Ba Daojiang and searched. Xiao Jixiang was very cooperative with all this. He didn't bring any weapons with him. He probably knew that he wouldn't have a chance to assassinate Bugnam of Gojoseon even if he had a weapon. In the main cabin, Yang Chendong sat there unhurriedly, drinking tea. Yang Chendong excitedly led Xiao Jixiang into the cabin. When he saw Yang Chendong, Xiao Jixiang hurriedly bowed respectfully. "This servant greets His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon." "Haha, Mr. Qiao, I trust you have been well since we last met." Yang Chendong raised his head with a smile on his face. The two of them had crossed paths when they were in Ming. At that time, Yang Chendong was a head above Yang Chendong. Now that so many years had passed, he was still a head above Yang Chendong. Xiao Jixiang couldn't help but blush when he heard Yang Chendong's words. However, when he thought about how Yang Chendong might become his prisoner, he could step on Yang Chendong's head and do whatever he wanted. He suppressed his embarrassment and said respectfully, "Bugnam of Gojoseon is wise and mighty. How can this servant compare to you? If there was a eunuch's greatest skill, it would be flattery. As long as you wanted to hear it, you would listen to it. Otherwise, how could you make the emperor happy and entrust them with important tasks?" Yang Chendong, who already knew this, didn't believe Xiao Jixiang's words at all. Thus, his expression didn't change as he said, "All right, don't show your tricks in front of this prince. Let's get down to business." "Yes, His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon." Xiao Jixiang replied and stood there with a bitter expression. Xiao Jixiang originally wanted to sit down and speak, but Yang Chendong didn't say anything. Naturally, he didn't dare to overstep his boundaries. At this time, he could only stand and speak his request. Among them, he emphasized how his brothers from the embroidered uniform guards would be placed if they joined Yang Xie. It could be seen that Xiao Jixiang was well prepared. After he spoke, he didn't have any intention of stopping. He spoke one sentence after another, quickly attracting everyone's attention. At this time, no one noticed that Yang Lu had already left the main cabin. He looked at Yang Ying standing outside and nodded lightly. Then, he returned to the main cabin as if nothing had happened. After receiving the signal, Yang Ying immediately waved at Bei Muraku and Yu Suzuki, who were standing outside the main cabin. The two figures quickly left. After a dozen breaths of time, a fragrance drifted with the wind and enveloped the Class 5 warship. All of this was done unknowingly, without attracting anyone's attention. In the main cabin, Chao Jixiang hurriedly spoke for nearly half an hour. Finally, he said, all embroidered uniform guards will replace the Black Cavalry and be responsible for Bugnam of Gojoseon's safety. Bugnam of Gojoseon will be under the protection of our embroidered uniform guards and head to Biming to ask for forgiveness from the Emperor. HM? Everything was fine before, and Chao Jixiang's attitude was also very humble. However, all of a sudden, the topic changed, causing everyone to be shocked. Especially Yang Yang, who was the middleman. His expression changed greatly. He looked at Chao Jixiang and said, Master Chao, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? Crazy? Ha ha ha, you're the ones who are crazy. As subjects of the great Ming dynasty, you don't want to serve the emperor. You actually want to rebel and change the dynasty. You need to have the ability to do so. Now that I am here, you should quickly surrender without a fight. Chao Jixiang's previous submissive attitude was replaced by a maniacal laugh. You're courting death. Ba Daojiang saw that someone was being impudent in front of the sixth young master. How could he let it go? He immediately reached for his waist and pulled out his blade. Then, a loud bang sounded, causing everyone in the main cabin to be shocked. For some reason, Ba Daojiang fell to the ground. His entire body was as soft as noodles. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't muster up any strength. The sudden change caused the other Black Cavalry soldiers to turn pale with fright. They immediately pulled out their blades. As they exerted their strength, the figures fell to the ground one by one. Needless to say, the situation at this moment was no different from Ba Daojiang's. What's going on? Guards, come and protect the emperor. Everything in front of him shocked Yang Yang. When he came back to his senses, he immediately shouted. Then, the sound of footsteps came from outside the main cabin. Battalion Commander Wang Nanhu led a platoon of Black Cavalry soldiers and rushed over after hearing the shout. When they rushed to the door of the main cabin, because they used too much strength, they couldn't stop in time and crashed into each other. More than 30 people fell to the ground. Even the 95 style in their hands were thrown to the ground. No one had the strength to hold a firearm in their hands. The Black Cavalry soldiers were hit, and so were the Cold Vanguard soldiers. Everything happened so suddenly that Yang Yang reached for his waist in shock. But when he exerted his strength, he felt dizzy. He felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, and he fell to the ground with a thump. Everyone who made a move fell to the ground at this moment, unable to get up. On the contrary, Yang Lu and Chao Jixiang, who had been standing there without moving, were fine. They just looked at everything coldly. The sound of footsteps came again, and another group of people rushed in from outside the main cabin. Unlike Ba Daojiang and Wang Nanhu, these people didn't lose their strength. Yang Ying, who was at the front of the pack, was holding a porcelain bottle in his hand. He was the first to arrive before Yang Lu. Master, this is the antidote for the bone-softening powder. Take it quickly, he said to Yang Lu with a fawning expression, and poured out a small black pill from the porcelain bottle. Okay, give Chao Jixiang one too. Yang Lu took the pill and swallowed it, and spoke to Chao Jixiang in a fawning manner, just like how Yang Ying spoke to him. Yang Yang, Ba Daojiang, Wang Nanhu, and the others clearly saw what was happening in front of them. In exchange, they were shocked. After some time, Yang Yang, who was lying on the ground, finally opened his mouth and said, Yang Lu, you slave, what are you doing? Do you know what you are doing? Of course I know. I am doing my duty as a subject. I am pledging my loyalty to the great Ming dynasty's emperor. At this moment, Yang Lu was like a ferocious tiger that bared its fangs, and he roared at Yang Yang. With this shout, Yang Yang was stunned. He couldn't accept this. Even if he was lying on the ground and couldn't move, he still felt like he was in a dream. It wasn't just Yang Yang who couldn't understand. Ba Daojiang, the Black Cavalry, Wang Nanhu, and the Cold Spear warriors couldn't understand either. Was this still Bugnam of Gojoseon's most trusted servant? What was he trying to do? Didn't he know that this was equivalent to betraying Bugnam of Gojoseon? This was an act of killing one's master. For a moment, everyone's first reaction was to quickly look at Yang Chendong, who had been sitting there motionless all this time. The trust they had for a long time made them place all their hopes on the king. Not only Ba Daojiang and the others, but even Chao Jixiang and Yang Lu also looked at Yang Chendong. They wanted to see what this person could do in the face of such a hopeless situation. Other than becoming a prisoner, what else could he do? Sigh. With a long sigh, Yang Chendong didn't let everyone down. He finally opened his mouth. With a sigh, Yang Chendong slowly raised his head. His face was very calm, and he still had the appearance of having the pearl of wisdom in his hand. He was not as surprised as Yang Yang and the others. Instead, he slowly opened his mouth and spat out 3 words. Why? This question was obviously directed at Yang Lu. He was asking why Yang Lu betrayed him. Facing Yang Chendong's deep gaze, Yang Lu didn't know why, but he actually felt a little nervous. His heart started to beat faster, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. This was the power of a dying tiger. Master. Yang Ying hurriedly stepped forward and supported Yang Lu, who was retreating. At this moment, Yang Lu felt that his performance just now was very embarrassing. But who could be blamed for this? For many years, he had been following Yang Chendong blindly. He had always been a servant. Now that he was suddenly going to be the master, he needed some time to adapt. Yang Lu, who had regained his footing, no longer looked at Yang Chendong's threatening gaze. Instead, he shouted as if he was venting his anger. Why? You still have the nerve to ask me? We are all servants, but Beta Persei is valued and is by your side every day. Yang Sangue is the director of the Security Bureau and has great power. Yang Si is the logistics minister and has great power. Even Yang Wu is your spokesperson in Qiqian City. No one dares to look down on you and has to curry favor with you. But what about me? With another loud shout, Yang Lu continued to vent his anger. I only married a few concubines and received some monetary gifts, but I was scolded by you in front of everyone. Then, you threw me to the southern Ming kingdom and didn't care about me. Yang Yang is suppressing my power, and Yang San is watching my every move. Most of the time, no one listens to what I say. We are all servants, and we all work for the Yang family. Why is there such a difference in treatment? May I ask, if I don't rebel against you, do I have any other choice? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.